Soviet Social Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers. They have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government.
Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Myles, and welcome to another episode of Pop Life. Yes, took the name of this show from one of my favorite Prince songs. So glad to have you guys here with us live. Also glad to say hello to those who'll be watching on the rewatch and listening on audio-only formats as well. Before we start, if you're new to this channel, if you're new to this show, please hit like, please hit subscribe. Of course, hit the notification bell so you're alerted whenever we go live. We never do Friday shows. Here we are doing a Friday show. That's why the notification bell, that's why subscribing is so important. It's a passive gesture that costs you nothing, and it goes a long way. As always, thank you to all the subscribers on YouTube and Twitch and the audio-only podcast formats where you find us. Also, thanks to all of our patrons collectively. You are the fuel in the engine that keeps TiR moving along. If you're enjoying what we do here, and you'd like to have access to the members only VIP status of the Champagne Room, well, there's only one way: become a patron for as little as $2 a month or $3 for the year. It can all be yours. Also, tickets are on sale, and the book is out. My mini book on everyday analysis, I Was a Teenage Anarchist, is out. If you want to see me live, not just me, it's less me and more my friends. I was able to reach out to some friends that were part of the punk, hardcore, and metal scenes in the San Francisco Bay Area. They were in some great bands from Machine Head, Forbidden, Attitude Adjustment, Death, Exodus. So we're going to have a little bit of talk about the book, some fun stories from these guys, and of course a Q&A in a very cool, intimate setting in the San Francisco Bay Area. Wherever you are watching or listening to the show, there's links in the description for that. Let me bring in my guest co-host. You've seen this gentleman on the show quite a bit. I hope you're watching his show Parallax Views. Please welcome, coming from the swamps, JG Michael.
What's up? The swamps of Florida, yes.
Swamps of Florida. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited because I've been talking a lot about Nightmare on Elm Street with my my ex-girlfriend lately. She's a big fan of the franchise, so it's been fresh on my mind. And I love the Elm Street movies, so.
Is this a way to reconnect with your ex? You're like, hey, I was watching Nightmare and just thinking about you.
Maybe a little bit.
Well, look, being a Gen X kid that grew up unsupervised with bootleg cable, I got over my fear of horror movies by watching horror movies. Tons of them. Mostly alone as my mom worked nights and I was left to my own devices. One of the horror franchises that stuck out to me and my group of friends in Richmond, California, was the wisecracking Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Our guest today, Ben Burgess, wrote a very timely piece, I believe it came out on Halloween, for Jacobin magazine about his love for Nightmare on Elm Street as well. This is from Ben's Jacobin piece. From the Reagan-era values of the second and third installments to the 1990s meta-commentary of New Nightmare, the franchise displays flashes of the specific cultural moments when each of the installments was born. And it's impossible to talk about the genesis of the franchise as a whole without talking about horrors that are all too real, all too familiar now as we enter the final months of 2023 with wars raging from Ukraine to Palestine. One of several inspirations that came together to give Craven the idea for the first movie was a series of articles he read about nightmare-ridden refugees from Southeast Asia, a region where the terror of the United States war in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and Pol Pot's subsequent genocide had created a lot of refugees. One victim's father was a doctor who gave him sleeping pills. The son pretended to take them while doggedly keeping himself awake. According to Craven, they had come from Southeast Asia, war camps, so the family just assumed he'd been traumatized. But he said, no, it's different. There's something stalking me in my dream. When the young man finally fell asleep, Craven recalled his parents carried him upstairs to lay him down in his bed. Relieved, they went to bed themselves, and their son started screaming. He died of ulcer causes in his sleep. Later in his closet, his parents found a pot of coffee, a plot device used in the first Nightmare movie. That is from my good friend, Jacobin columnist. You may know him from the host of the Give Them an Argument podcast. You may know him from his various appearances on all the hot shows, and you may know him from always debating shitty right-wingers. Please welcome Ben Burgess.
I like that you managed to quote the three sentences that were actually like leftist political. The three paragraphs that were actually leftist political stuff for that whole article. The rest of it was just kind of like, "Hey, these movies are awesome." That's
exactly what I was trying to do. You have to be serious people here, Ben. Look here, Mr. Metallica shirt. I tagged you on Twitter.
I saw that.
I remember I found those articles when I watched for the 18th time Never Sleep Again, which I believe is a 4.5-hour documentary about every Nightmare film. And it was done before Craven passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and did a search, and I found that the LA Times has great archives. So does the New York Times. There's also, if you are a New York Times subscriber, they have articles about it too, and it became a syndrome. Do you guys feel that the true impetus of these movies gets forgotten, that syndrome? Because every Wes Craven movie that I can think of that's a big movie comes from something real. I believe he was he a history teacher or an English teacher before he got into movies?
He was an English teacher, but he is still. But yeah, he does still seem to often be inspired by stuff like that.
We are looking at a massive refugee crisis from Ukraine to Palestine, and that doesn't even include people fleeing from embargoed countries and climate refugees. The Syncta syndrome is like Hmong Cambodian death syndrome, where people were dying in their sleep. I guess it still happens to this day. There's nothing more terrifying than not being able to get rest in your rest, which is what Freddy represents. I think that gets lost somewhere along the lines of the third movie when he's telling people to fuck the prime time and slamming their faces in televisions, which was the only thing I remembered from the movie theater when me and my friends got to watch it, lying about our age. How do you guys see, JG, I'll start with you. You always have a lot to say about this kind of stuff. Do you think we've forgotten the real terror of Freddy Krueger?
Yeah, I would say in some ways. I mean, Freddy becomes very much a comedy character, especially by, what Freddy's dead. He's basically a cartoon character in the sixth movie. I do think one aspect that made the Nightmare films resonate with younger people in the 80s was that, and this is sort of a socio-political subtext, but really the thread between all the movies is, the sins of the father fall on the sons and the daughters. And not only that, but really they're movies about parents that don't really want to listen to their children. And I think that's what makes them so resonant, especially for teenagers, because it's like, none of the parents in these movies ever listen to the kids, So I think that's like the key to, I would say, the first 5 Nightmare films is the fact that they really are movies about, it's sort of like the same theme you see in the classic Christian Slater movie, Heathers. Parents not listening to their kids. And for me, that's the biggest takeaway I get from the Nightmare movies.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Freddy's Dead, I don't think this made it into the final version. I think this was cut by the suits at Jacobin, but but yeah, I think this was cut in edits. But I did originally have a line about how Freddy's Dead was the movie that sort of saw the full Bugs Bunification of the full full Bugs Bunification of Freddy Krueger, right? That like the way that he's sort of laying, he's like doing wisecracks as he's like laying traps, and it's like he might as well be chewing on a carrot while he's doing it. But the point that JG just made is interesting because thinking about it, the only ones out of the original movies, those first 6 sort of in-universe Nightmare on Elm Street movies, number 6 is basically the only one where the main character isn't a teenager, right? I mean that like it's a lot of the movies following around teenagers, but I mean the woman who works at the I don't really know what that's supposed to be, like a halfway house or something. For troubled teens, but the woman who works there, do lots of spoilers here. Freddy's daughter, it turns out, is probably the closest thing that movie has to like a clear protagonist, and she's like, I don't know, she's in her 30s or something. I guess number 3, Nancy is decent amount of the movie is following her around, and she's older now, but still,
it's all about the Dream Warriors in 3, man.
Yeah, that's the title, right?
How about the song? We're the Dream Warriors.
Yeah, I think a line that actually did make it into the final, version is that like I couldn't write about it without having that song go through my head.
I saw
but yeah, like and even to the extent that it is following around Nancy, I mean, she's still, I think they say she's a graduate student at one point in the movie, but she's still a younger person who is having trouble getting the adults who actually have power to believe what she's saying.
So that's the theme. Adults don't listen to young people, even if they are graduate students that are doing some remarkable work in dream studies.
Yeah, hotshot grad student. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I think it is a theme. I mean, I think that there is like just sort of look, I mean, I think as goofy as those movies get, especially as they go on, I mean, like there are some pretty basic fears that they're playing with. And I think one of them is just like, look, it's just sort of innately scary to think about kids, even if they're teenagers, whose parents can't protect them for the things that threaten them. I mean, that's just sort of fundamentally scary. And it's like, so all this stuff about how like the parents, with the best intentions in the world are always trying to get you to get some rest definitely ties into that.
Well, Kristen's parents are isn't her name Kristen?
In the 4th and 5th movie?
Well, she's a different person in 4, but she's in 3.
Yeah, 3 and 4. She's the one who didn't come back.
Yeah, her mom.
Yeah, I always mix her and Alice up.
Yeah, easy mistake.
Easy mistake. They all look alike. What were you trying to say, JG? You jump in there.
Oh, I was going to say, maybe we could revisit it later on in the conversation. I know a lot of people will say, I mean, and I'm not saying these movies aren't goofy, especially the sequels, but I think people forget there's stuff in those sequels that it gets really dark at times. Especially like a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street 5. I mean, they're dealing with issues like bulimia in that, and like, I think the 4th one deals with like having an alcoholic father, and they deal with some. They get pretty dark at times.
There's a lot of suicide stuff even in Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
Well, they're all kids that are in an institution.
Yeah.
Right. That are all suicidal for various reasons, and Freddy becomes the thread, but they're all there for different reasons, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that they're all there. I think that they all have different issues that Freddy is using to try to get at them. But I mean, like a big thing early in the movie is like, and part of their frustration with the adults who run the place not taking it seriously is like, you should be more impressed by the fact that we're all dreaming about the same guy, right? Like this.
And
Like,
no,
it doesn't
that's
make any
so funny.
sense.
The best part of 3 is when the doctors they're having their group session, and I'm not gonna lie, I do get 3 and Bad Dreams confused because there's a similar actress and the theme of Bad Dreams is similar. But when Nancy walks in the room and she goes, and she's got that accent, and he's got knives for fingers. She tries to cover up her accent. She's so Heather Langenkamp's accent is so, I think she's from Kansas or something. And he's got a big brown hat. And they're like, oh, and it's like, and no one goes, how the fuck did you know that? The one doctor goes kind of, hey, but he says it kind of matter of fact, like, oh, how the fuck did you know that?
Yeah,
it's just
people, they're not nearly as surprised as they should be that she has the exact details down to the fact that she can finish the rhyming song that like the girl they're trying to like, calm down started. That's like that she knows exactly how this song that she's singing ends. It's like, well, like how could you possibly know that? Like other than what turns out to be true in the world of this movie.
They don't seem to care about their kids, but the first movie,
which is a thing, right? Because it's like thematically, just because it's like, I mean, okay, there's obviously a very not real example, but like but just the sort of general sense that for a lot of adults, a lot of things that the kids might be going through are that are like traumatic or upsetting, whatever, might just be like annoyances, like like I just want you to take care of your shit and stop bothering me with it.
That's the 80s.
Yeah.
There's TV and there's at least 45 channels, kid. I don't want to hear your shit. JG doesn't know this, Ben, because JG came up in the 90s with parents that listened to him. He had those parents that were like, how do you feel?
Oh shit, what was that like?
God. I wish, man.
He came home from school and they wanted to help him with his homework. I'm like one of those regular dumb parents. It's like, look, kid, I can help you to the 4th grade. Once you start doing long division, you are on your own, buddy.
Helping with his homework, asking him how he feels.
Yeah.
If there's like a demonic force that's stalking him in his dreams, they'll like listen to him about it.
You got to sleep with your child. You got to be like, hey, are you scared? Do you need a nightlight? Better than that, how about you just get me and then me and you will watch cartoons all night? How's that sound? Fuck yeah. So yeah, I'm that dad. And I think parents of the younger generation were more, they knew the flaws of their own parents. Like, think about our parents wanted to hug us a little bit more than their shitty parents that didn't even know what a teenager was because it didn't exist in their day. So everybody was a piece of shit. So JG had them parents that he hugged him. Look at him. That's why he's always smiling.
You're giving my parents too much credit. Man.
His dad was like Buffalo Bill. She's like, I can't relate to this nightmare movie. My family loved me.
You are right though about the first Nightmare movie and the whole parental element. I always think that both John Saxon and Ronnie Blackley, both of whom were like name actors at that time. They're really the only names in the movie. I think they don't get enough credit because, John Saxon is just kind of, he's the cop that's off doing his own thing and he doesn't know how to deal with his daughter. And then Ronnie is basically just a wine mom. There is this whole like dark side of suburbia aspect to the first Nightmare movie that I really love.
I feel like a lot of those new left guys, and I would love to know a slight divergence from Nightmare, but not really. A lot of those new left guy, Toby Hooper, does it with Poltergeist. Definitely the nightmare movies all take place in suburbia. Carpenter does it with Halloween. I feel like they really thumbed their nose at the idea of the nuclear family in suburbia
Mm-hmm.
with the dark, like as you're saying, the dark side of suburbia, these suburban nightmares, everything and then it becomes a trope, sadly, where everything has to take place in a suburb until you get to Candyman. What do you think about that, JG?
Yeah, I think that's on point. I mean, I think, that's like the whole point of the first big slasher movie everyone always references, right?
Halloween.
John Carpenter's Halloween. Like
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of John Carpenter's Halloween is like, oh, this is happening in the suburb, and we don't know why. We don't know why he became a killer,
Mhm.
And I think that really played on
really
people
really
in the
drawn
80s.
out by the contrast to the dumbass Rob Zombie remake, where
Don't get into it with me, man. I love that movie.
Okay, wow, okay, that's all right, guys. I just remembered I had a different time commitment, so but it's like, no, come on. I mean, zombie, like he's like, oh well, shit. There has to be an explanation. I mean, something must have fucked him up. What could it be? You know what I know? I know what it could be. His parents were fucked up rednecks.
That's the one. That's the one aspect of the zombie movies I don't like. I like the second one because it feels like a weird David Lynch movie at times. But
because he hates rednecks. JG, just admit it. Rob Zombie fucking hates rednecks. I know you don't want to believe it. I know you fucking listen to Thunder Kiss 66 as you're tucking yourself in at night, but the motherfucker hates rednecks.
We're doing a whole show on this. I'm gonna make my case for pro redneck. No, watch the movie 31. It's a pro redneck movie.
Okay.
I'm sure there's people in there fucking their cousin in there just to make sure he gets real good incest in there.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that Rob Zombie has anything nice to say about the white working class.
But like, putting aside, it's my fault because I brought it up. But putting aside Rob Zombie's deep hatred of working class people in Middle America, there's also like it's like it is a useful contrast, right? Because it's like, okay, that one, it's the opposite of a kid in the suburbs inexplicably being evil. It's a kid who, explicably becomes evil because his parents, are fucked up rednecks and, whatever. That's all the stuff we were just talking about. But in the, but stuff like Halloween, right? Yeah, that's the scary thing about it. So it's like, I mean, I see what Jason's saying. I mean, in a way, it is thumbing his nose at the suburbs, but it's also the whole premise also relies on like, you have to start out sort of thinking of the suburbs as this very safe place. Otherwise, the contrast isn't scary.
It's like the anti Leave It to Beaver.
It was a war on beaver. These are all people that grew up on beaver. They probably were beaver, right? Let's be honest. And they fucking hate Leave It to Beaver, and this is what you get. And I don't know if Craven hated Leave It to Beaver, and I think that's why his movies are a little different.
I mean, Wes is a bit weird because my understanding is that Wes grew up in like a really strict Baptist family.
Yes.
I don't know if he was allowed to watch TV, but he did not watch movies until he went to college.
Yeah, he's not. He doesn't seem to be the same kind of movie guy that Carpenter and Hooper are in that regard. And he does have a big catalog, and I think because he passed away so soon, people kind of released all this made-for-TV stuff on DVD. Like I've seen it all, and I've seen Deadly Friend like 1,000,005 times.
That scene with the basketball, man.
The whole movie is worth the scene with the basketball. It might as well have been a made-for-TV film, in my opinion. Deadly Friend.
But yeah, Wes Craven seems like he had the kind of upbringing that, if he'd been, if he'd been born in a later generation than he was, he would have been one of those kids who wasn't allowed to watch He-Man because He-Man falsely claims to be the universe. It's like it's that kind of thing. So,
I want to know, is anyone watching this show right now? Please leave a comment if you're watching the show right now and you have one of those parents that wouldn't let you watch He-Man. Dude, that's a real. I had a friend Ben, you might even have been this guy. His parents told him you could either pick Cobra stuff or GI Joe stuff, but you can't have both because you can't have fighting. So
That's funny.
he couldn't fight
Yeah,
it.
kind of the opposite issue, but yeah.
Just building up your war chest. JG's like, I didn't have toys.
I just had my wrestling action figures.
If you had wrestling action figures, you know what that means? Nobody wanted to play with you because your toys didn't fit in anybody's play set.
Wow.
Once you came with like, hey guys, you want it? Like, no, you can't. There's no articulation, JG. So I have to get to this. I was gonna ask you guys some questions, and I put some questions through Chat GPT. And I didn't know you could do that. And they're really funny. So I asked Chat GPT to give me questions for a podcast about Nightmare on Elm Street through a left lens.
Okay, nice.
And this is one of the questions. In what ways can Freddy Krueger be seen as a symbol for the oppressive forces in society?
Jesus Christ.
How does he embody fears related to authority figures and societal norms?
You should ask it for the JFK connection to the Elm Street movie. I'm not joking. Elm Street was where Kennedy died. There's probably a conspiracy theory about it.
Oh my God. I wish I would have thought of that. I wish I would have thought of that. Here, Ben, you're going to love this. How do the later films...
Dallas, like every other town, has an Elm Street.
Every town. Every city has an Elm Street. So we have to get to this. This is a serious question here.
Oh.
Ben Burgess and I, in the dumbest way possible, I shouldn't... Yeah, it was just silly. We were trying to figure out which Freddy movie, because we didn't remember, had the pizza scene where the souls were the pepperoni.
Elm Street 4 Dream Master.
And the particularly funny thing about this is that's the first one we watched while trying to figure this out. But I think we both fell asleep on the couch in that scene and didn't realize that it was in there. So it was we're like, oh shit, was it 5?
We watched 5 and they were like, I guess we gotta watch 6. So we watched them all. We watched them all.
Yeah, I mean, by that point, I think we'd realized the thing. It was just like, fuck it, let's just keep watching and go around, in a circle.
So but we had to go into an actual, okay, what goes in what order. We watched the Freddy vs. Jason, and then we watched the remake, and then we watched the originals. Ben Burgess is not a fan of the second one. He hates the second one like the second one kicked his dog in the fucking face. He hates the second one, and it's not necessary to hate the second one that much. Can you talk about your hate for the second one, Ben Burgess?
Okay, well, I think you're exaggerating how much I hate it, but I do think it's a bad movie. Yeah, I mean, what I said in the article is that obviously Wikipedia didn't exist in 1985, but it feels like about the movie that you would make if you skimmed the Wikipedia entry for the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, got bored halfway through, and cobbled together a plot based on like what you glean from that. Like it just didn't seem to kind of realize anything really about what made the first good or interesting. Like the thing that's interesting about the second one is that it's got all of this like very, certainly watching it now, it feels like this just very over the top, obvious gay analogy, right? So the plot of the movie, which is like, okay, earlier we were talking about the suburbs, and there is something interesting if you think about the line from Halloween in 78 where the slashers in the suburbs to a couple of years later, right? There's the first Friday the 13th where people are being slashed out in the woods, which is scary in a different way, not because of like the contrast with the safe place, but just because like there's nobody around. And then And then, in Nightmare on Elm Street, then it's inside your head, right? It's in your dreams, which is interesting in a different way. And it's this sort of strange kind of floaty, like slasher fairy tale almost. Except that number 2 isn't like that at all. I mean, it really has barely anything to do with dreams. The whole thing is that Freddy Krueger is possessing this kid. And there's a lot of really over the top analogizing between the Freddy possessing him and homosexuality. I mean, that's pretty on the surface. I remember, years and years ago, my friend Richard always called that one the Rainbow Nightmare. And then when I watched that documentary you mentioned earlier, the 4.5-hour one, I've only seen it once, but I have seen, I kind of watched it, I think, while exercising and stuff over the course of a few days, when it first came out. That's like very explicitly confirmed, like that's what we had in mind, whatever. And so okay, so there are 2 issues here. One is just like evaluating it as a movie, like forget the subtext, all that stuff, just like as a movie. And I've got to say, I don't really see anything that's like good or compelling about it. I mean, just visually, it's just kind of not fun to even look at. It's got again, it takes away the whole dreamy aspect of Nightmare on Elm Street with this weird possession plot. It's just, I don't know, there's just something like really weird and unpleasant about the viewing experience. But then if you're going to say, okay, no, well, forget whether it's a good movie, it's like an interesting movie because of the gay analogy. Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the gay analogy because this, I understand that, just because people I think I get why, there's something campy and fun about some of it. I think I get why it has a certain gay cult following, but also I don't know, pretty much everything about the way that analogy is handled seems pretty wildly homophobic. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but the fact in itself, right, that Freddy's, possession by Freddy Krueger has been analogized to homosexuality seems maybe not great. And then again, we said we're spoiling left and right here. At the end of the movie, he's essentially saved from the Freddy possession by the love of his girlfriend. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't seem like a very subtle, analogy there. So, and I understand that almost every movie it ends with a little maybe he's not gone totally, but they all end that way. That doesn't mean anything. So, it seems like, if you're kind of looking at it through this political lens, then it's like, well, this is just kind of this mod testament to Reagan era homophobia. If you're looking at it just as a movie, it's like, yeah, this doesn't, it doesn't feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It doesn't feel like it includes or captures anything that makes those unusually interesting movies.
Interesting. JG, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this.
I like the second Elm Street movie, but I take a certain weird joy in watching really mean-spirited horror movies, and that movie is very mean-spirited. And Freddy is, I think Freddy is more brutal in that than in the other ones. He's just very he's dark in that one, man. So there's things I like about it aesthetically, but I think Ben is right. It really is the black sheep of the franchise because it doesn't feel like it fits. And, eventually they basically ignore it in part 3, so, I mean, it's a very odd movie. I actually refuse to believe that movie was originally written as an Elm Street movie. I think it's what they did with the Hellraiser sequels. A lot of those Hellraiser sequels that came out in the 90s with Pinhead, they started out as scripts for entirely different movies.
Yep.
And the Weinsteins were like, oh, no, we'll just tack in Pinhead at the end of it, That's how we'll keep the rights longer, And I feel like something was going on with Elm Street 2.
Well, the director, so the writer of the movie.
You would have had to change so little of it to make it not an Elm Street movie. Essentially almost none of it. I mean, there's just there's a house and there's some sort of demonic something or other in the house that's possessing people. That's it, right? There's almost nothing about dreams in that movie. It's just, it just feels like this very separate thing, like
Yeah, I mean, you literally have Freddy jump out into the real world during a pool party and do a
The
massacre.
pool party scene. Look, for me, the pool party scene they could have kept that. If you take the pool party scene out of that movie, for me, it's a pretty good movie. I was terrified of the trailer of that movie when they would show the trailer for that on cable. I don't know how old, it must have been like 8 or 9. And the scene they would show is where Freddy goes, "You've got the body, I got the brains," and he rips his head back. To JG's point,
somebody in the chat points out makes it sound like Freddy's going to be pimping him out
a little bit, or he's a big Pet Shop Boys fan. But JG's not amused. He's not a Pet Shop Boys fan. He is a lot meaner in that movie, and that movie to me is frightening. There's a scene, I was cooking today playing part 2, and I was like, let me watch part 2 and get ready for Ben and his fucking persnickety ass fucking part 2 hating ass. And I was cooking, and it's on in the background, and the scene where he runs to his homie's house after he's supposed to have sex with his girlfriend.
Yeah, and his friend is like, what are you doing here? There's
What are you doing
waiting for you.
But the scene where Freddy comes out of the dude or Freddy comes out of the main character and then kills him, and you hear these blood-curdling screams, and he's yelling for his father. I've seen that movie too many times. And I was cooking in the kitchen, you know the layout of my house. Yeah. I can't really see the TV. And I was like, God damn, I got goosebumps just like listening to it, because I was like, that's so frightening. Go, JG.
I was going to say, if I could, the weirdest thing for me about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, because I've met the director, Jack Shoulder, and Jack's actually underrated as a horror movie director. He did The Hidden with Kyle MacLachlan and one of my favorite slasher movies, Alone in the Dark from 1982, which is actually a really interesting and much more political movie than people realize. It's an asylum slasher movie, but it kind of argues that, maybe the inmates are actually less crazy than everyone on the outside. But I think that movie is the least interesting movie I've seen of his in ways, the Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I think Ben's right in a lot of ways about his assessment of it. The thing that always got me, though, when I talked to Jack Shoulder, he's like, I didn't notice any of the gay subtext. And
so he doubled down on it in the movie. Because he didn't know. He didn't realize the gay subtext. So it's like, yeah, let's kill the PE teacher with balls to the ass.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, there's literally a gay S&M bar in it. It's a scene right out of William Friedkin's Cruising. Like, I'm like, what? How do you not notice this, Jack? Are you kidding me? And he will, to this day, if you ask him, he'll say, I didn't realize that was
the dance. Are like, hey, we want you to do the thing like Tom Cruise in Risky Business. Can you do like a Tom Cruise Risky Business kind of dance in your underwear? Again, I get the dude is oblivious to it. It's just everything that he thought to do, they just made it so much more gay. Right. When he runs out, when he's about to hit his girlfriend for the first time, and he goes, I got to go to Grady's house. You're like, word? Like that was the first thing on your mind? Right. Because I'm not thinking about Ben Burgess when I'm.
Right. I take great comfort in that. Yeah.
What Ben's doing? Is he okay? How's Lucy?
The movie is, though, for me, like I said, out of all the movies I've seen of that director, Jack Shoulder, it is kind of the least interesting for me. It's not as subversive as some of his other films. I feel like that is the ultimate sort of like Reaganite horror movie. Fear the gays, The
title card is horrible.
Totally, yeah.
If you watch that movie, when the title card comes on the screen, you're like, ooh, is this a made-for-TV movie?
Yeah, I will say, finding one nice thing to say about this movie, the poster's really good. They use that.
The poster is amazing.
Yeah. The poster is great. Now look, we got to get our stuff out on part 2, There's like 15 movies in this damn franchise. We have to talk about part 3, which is everyone's favorite, The Dream Warriors.
I hate to disappoint you, but that is not my favorite Elm Street movie.
That's fine.
It's definitely not mine either, but I do like it a lot.
I think it's like, I always tell people Elm Street 3 is Elm Street 1, but with a much bigger budget. It's the spectacle, of the Elm Street franchise, in my view.
Freddy gets to be a wisecracking guy and scary. Go back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for like whatever, my ranking would be like 1 is up here, and then like somewhere, like it's like, and then number 7 would be, the New Nightmare would be number 2. And then I do think number 3 would be number 3, but I actually find it interesting how many people have that as their favorite Elm Street movie, because look, I like it a lot. Out of the original in-universe sequels, so not counting New Nightmare, I mean, it's definitely my favorite of those, right? But like to me, the gap between number 1 and all of the sequels, so number 3, I think there's a huge drop off between 1 and 3, and then an even bigger drop off between 3 and the rest of them. But like in I mean, number 1, I mean, to my mind, I mean, that's like one of the best horror movies ever made. That's that's like kind of the platonic ideal of a slasher movie. And I guess I find it really interesting how many people will say, because I've, every time I've like kind of posted about this or whatever, I'll always get somebody who volunteers its opinion. How many people will say, it probably came out differently than I meant it.
No, I love the way you said it. No, don't fucking take that shit back at all.
But people will always say that, and I'm always surprised by it, right? Because it's like, best sequel, sure, absolutely. I mean, even if you said best sequel period, so you're including New Nightmare, I would disagree. I think New Nightmare is even better, but I would understand that, right? But like, but the best one period seems crazy to me, because number 1 is so good, and it seems like it's on this entirely different level than anything that came after it, to me at least. And I think the best theory I heard of this was my friend Dave Hewitt, who's a writer, who said he compared it to the way that a lot of people like T2 better than the original Terminator. And in both cases, it's like you're talking about a movie that's still very good, right? But part of it, and this is, I think, the that like cultural ambiance about like the Reagan in the 80s, the Morning in America era, does become relevant again here, is that I think a big part of it, this is Dave Hewitt's view, is that people are responding to the optimism, right? That there's a sort of that there's something that's like a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun. There's there's a little bit more of an unambiguous feeling of victory over the bad guys, although obviously in both cases it doesn't last until the next movie, right? But like and when we get to number 4, the way that it's undone in there is very, very funny. But like in but I think that's what people are responding to, because just as like a matter of like which is a better movie, I don't understand it.
I think the appeal of that movie. No, I'm sorry, Jason. I just wanted to say real quick. I think the appeal of the movie is each of the Dream Warriors in that movie, the teens. I think there's someone you can relate to. My favorite will always be. I loved Tyrion growing up. I had a huge crush on Tyrion. I'm bad and beautiful in my dreams.
Yeah.
I think there's something that just resonates with like young people that watch that movie. They each have their own favorite.
Yeah.
I still have a bit of a crush on that woman. So if I found out she lived near Ben in LA, I would accidentally go to his house on purpose a lot more to have donuts. But seriously, I went to the theater to see 3, and there was so much hype around 3.
I like that in this fantasy, she's just hanging out at the grimy donut shop next to my apartment.
You never know where you're going to actually run into the future Mrs. Myles. You live in a place where there's a lot of people that are famous to me, but not famous to anyone else. So,
fair enough. Yeah. So,
I just want to say, I was I remember the hype around 2 movies
Yeah.
very vividly, and how entrenched they were in pop culture. And it's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, way more so than 2, and Terminator 2. And I think Terminator 2 was what, like 7 years, 8 years after the first one. So people kind of forgot the first one. You know the first one, but by the time Terminator 2 comes out and Guns N' Roses has the song, and they're the biggest band in the world. Kind of the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dokken wasn't the biggest band in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a song for this movie. There was a massive MTV campaign for this movie. I think around the time part 3 comes out is when Freddy's phone line comes out, his 1-800 number comes out. So he becomes kind of a marketing phenomenon, and I'm a preteen at this point. And this movie is resonating with people in my age cohort, that it's a thing that we have to go see, and it's for us, but it's not really for us, but it's for us, right? So, Monster Squad is way more for us than Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is. But I don't remember anyone that went to the theater to go see, and I love Monster Squad. But when I think of part 3 and I think of Terminator 2, the analogy you have in your piece, I think that's so true, because the way those 2 movies kind of took over pop culture, like I'll Be Back, is Terminator 1. That's the first one. But we remember it from the sequel. There's so much stuff that he says in the sequel that people think is like, it's only from that one. They don't go back and watch the first one, because the first one moves different than the rest of those movies, because the first one's a horror film, so it moves like a horror film. So if you're not really a horror fan, you're probably not gonna. It doesn't have a score full of rock bands. It's a totally different movie. So when you watch the first Nightmare, which isn't the biggest budget film, but they still make things work, right? It's still frightening. By the time you get to the third, it's not really frightening, but it's fun. And it becomes a fun popcorn movie that you can't just replicate, because up until that point, I would say from Black Christmas to that moment, 1987, killers don't talk. They wear a mask. They stalk you in the woods, maybe the suburbs, but usually the woods. And they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I've been watching a lot of videos about the Halloween movies lately, because like the Joe Blow horrors put out a bunch of them, and I don't know, I just recently watched H2O again, and so I was watching some stuff about that, and it is always funny that like every video about a Halloween movie, it's like, oh yeah, Michael was played by stuntman such and such. It's like, yeah, it's always like literally a stuntman behind the mask. It like doesn't even have to be an actor. Whereas Freddy just is Robert Englund, which the remake made very clear, when we get to that. But yeah, no, totally. Like, and even in the first one, right? I mean, there are flashes of what the character is going to become, right? In the first movie, there's the like most obviously the thing with the tongue and the phone and the I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. Like that's a very later Freddy thing.
But that's still
but he's still so terrifying in the first one. I mean, just the scene where he the rotating bedroom scene. That image is always going to be stuck in my, where he's like dragging her across the ceiling.
Totally.
Whereas I think in the
first 2 movies, I'm telling you, the first 2 movies have 2 of the most frightening kills in all of the Nightmare series, except for they redo it in New Nightmare pretty much.
Yeah.
The Tina murder, and then when you see Tina's body in the hallway, totally scares the hell out of you when you're a kid.
Yep.
And part 2, when he comes out of the guy and God, every time we talk about part 2, and then he kills dude screaming for his dad. Those to me are the 2 most frightening kills in that movie.
Well, so what I was going to say is that I think that there are these flashes in one of what he's going to become, but for the most part, he's actually pretty quiet in one. Like he has a few lines, but like he's mostly just kind of skulking around, like smiling in a creepy way. There's like creepy visual effects going on. He's scraping his claws against the radiator, all of that stuff, right? Like he's not, like by the time like number 3 is really where they introduce the character that he kind of stays for like the up through number 6, where he's like literally saying shit like it's welcome to prime time, bitch, before he kills somebody. That is, that's really where he's coming into his own in that. And like, look, don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching that guy. I mean, like if you have, like I think like, I don't know, like number 5, right, the Dream Child, I think that's like one of the weaker ones, but it's like, if next time I'm in Rosarito or you're in LA, if you're like, hey Ben, let's order pizza and watch Nightmare on Elm Street 5, be like, absolutely.
Go Jay.
I was just gonna say about Dream Warriors. I do think it sets the tone and tenor for the series, and not only that, but the first movie is actually a very unusual movie because the tropes aren't all set that time. When I first saw the original Nightmare, I thought Tina was going to be the main character, and she's gone after the first act, really, but you don't know that at first. Whereas
the trick
you watch
Psycho, right?
Yeah. But you watch Dream Warriors, and I think it's made very clear early on, Kristen is the main character. I also think it's interesting too, because I don't know if you guys knew this, but the original Nightmare on Elm Street, before it got into production and whatnot, Disney was interested in that movie. Yeah, and I understand why, because there is this weird fairy tale element to it, especially the original ending, which was supposed to be, she banishes Freddy. She realized he has no power, and all her friends are alive, and
it's like Nightmare on Elm Street 1, and again, New Nightmare also in a different way, but it's like Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is like essentially like a slasher fairy tale, right? It's
yeah. And had Disney picked it up, they would have changed it. It wouldn't have the slasher elements, but I could see why Disney was interested.
Hey,
It's a coming of age.
Disney did Pretty Woman, which was also a very different film. Where they got there.
Hey, they did some dark like children's horror back in the Watcher in the Woods, man.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Black culture.
But yeah, I mean, number 3. Actually, by the way, did you watch that video I sent you about it, Jason? It's it was
Joe Blow.
Yeah, it was Joe Blow. They've made a few videos about it, but this was the one that I think was it's in their like WTF happened to series, right, for it, which includes 2 things that are both amazing that I hadn't known about number 3, both of them about Robert Englund. One, he apparently had this whole, like, I don't think he got a script. He had like a treatment at least for like his proposal for Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And they said, and he's like, yeah, they probably didn't want it because I didn't really know how to end it. So I went all Cronenberg for the ending, and I don't know what that means, but I really want to know, right? Like I really want to watch whatever Englund's idea was. But the other thing was just the detail about the apparently when he was partying with Dokken. Everybody snorted coke off of his finger knives.
Not surprised. Also, I'll be interviewing Tom Worman in 2 weeks, producer of that Dokken record, my favorite Van Halen album, Fair Warning, my second favorite Motley Crue record, Shout at the Devil. So I'm so excited to ask all the drug questions. But there is something interesting about part 3, and I want to get your guys' opinion if you think this is why they really start going by the wayside. Because part 3 has so many comical elements in it, and they are bringing in this younger crowd. I don't know if the movies are PG-13 at this point or not, because PG-13 isn't a rating until 1984, so the first one definitely was R. And I don't know if part 2 is R PG-13 either, because that was like 85, I think, when that comes out.
Yeah, it's Temple of Doom, right? That's why they did the PG-13, because it's like it was like Burger King and shit was promoting it because it's like, oh, it's PG, and then it's like, wow, this
Golima. Yeah, like
very not appropriate for children.
We've said this on the show before. Anyone watching the show or listening to the show, please go back and watch any pre-1984 PG movies. You're going to be surprised of what a PG movie is. That being,
I was gonna say that's even true. You mentioned Monster Squad. I remember showing that to a group of middle schoolers that I was like babysitting, and I forgot there's nudity in that movie. Like,
it's PG before 84 is very different. Go back and watch a PG movie from the 70s, but because they're bringing in younger people, and the merchandising starts in 87, right? There becomes a Freddy doll and all this other stuff.
Caligula got a PG rating in the 70s.
Did it?
No, it didn't. It didn't.
Are you sure?
I'm sure it didn't. I mean, I guess I don't know, but I'm sure.
Dude, there's some PGs like there's a lot of hits in this PG movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, so number 3 is like an interesting transitional fossil because, like you said, it does set the template for the rest of the series, but it also is big, even though Craven had less to do with the final product than I'd assumed for many years. Like, he wrote a draft of the script and they like kept like some things from it, but it's like really dramatically different what ended up being. But still, you can feel his presence in there a little bit. Like, it does actually feel like it's about dreams in the way that the first does and the New Nightmare does, and honestly most of the rest of it really doesn't. So it does have in a different way. I mean, to JJ's point earlier, it does, in a weird way, number 3 is also a fairy tale in a way that like none of the movies afterwards except for New Nightmare were.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like, if you go back and I'm sure you've gone back and watched it, but when I was watching it, because I watched it recently by myself, and I was like, when I think about how excited me and my friend group was to watch this, it was like movies made for us. And then they pumped out the next one the next year. They're just like year after year, they're just pumping them out. And these movies got way less scary and way more over the top. And I think that's because they're selling it to a much younger audience. Do you think that's part of it, or you don't think so?
Don't know, did you?
I have a controversial take if we're going to get into Elm Street 4 and 5.
Go for it.
So I would say I think Nightmare and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So the first movie and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I think, are above and beyond in terms of quality, the best ones. But my favorites are actually the 4th movie and the 5th movie. Although I will only watch. I like the 5th movie so much that I have the Laserdisc.
Oh wow!
Because I will not watch the cut
version. When you hug your children.
I won't watch the cut version. The uncut version of Nightmare on Elm Street 5 is really good. It's a lot darker than people realize if you see the uncut version. But
do you happen to know if the like one that was in like the DVD box set is the uncut one?
No, it only got released on Laserdisc.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
It's really dark, like the bulimia stuff in it and all. I mean, it's very gothic in a weird way.
Yeah.
I really adore the 5th movie. The 4th one is my favorite. Everyone's always like Dawkins in part 3, and I'm like, nah, man, Dramarama in part 4.
Okay. Well,
I'll do anything.
Well, I do want to talk about that, but let's do a little bit more Dream Warriors, so we can give the Dream Master number 4 its proper due.
Yeah, don't leave out. I wanted to talk about Dream Master, so I hope we can get to it.
Yeah, we're gonna get to it.
Yeah, we'll give Dream Master its due.
Oh wow!
But yeah, that's. But yeah, okay. Number 3, we've got Dokken. We've again, it does feel fairy tale-ish, dreamish again. It's also something that's important to track because it's going to be really important when we get to number 5. It's really where the Catholicism of the series picks up, right? I mean, there's a teensy little bit of it in number 1, right? 5, 6, better grab your crucifix. And like there is like a very like big gaudy Catholic looking crucifix, on the wall in the first one. But that's really it, right? Like that's the only like hint of like Catholic imagery there. Whereas 3 gets very Catholic, and then 5 is like so Catholic that like one of the main characters is a fetus. But in in number 3, I mean, this is where you get the this is where you find out that that his mother was a nun. And you meet the ghost.
1,000 maniacs.
Yeah, is that actual song that's in 5? Right?
6 or 5, where the kids tease them for getting
Just
child of gang rape. It's like, Jesus.
What kind of children are these?
How do you know that? Everybody knows your mom.
It's like, man, kids can be vicious when bullying each other, but not like that. So, and it's also, again, I mean, like, first movie, Freddy is defeated. I mean, I don't know. It's from 1984, but almost in this very 1970s way, just kind of by the power of positive thinking, essentially. But it's this like purely internal mental thing with, Nancy having this breakthrough. And then number 2, he's defeated essentially by, I don't know, heterosexuality. And then,
so Dianetics in part 1, sexuality in part 2.
And then, but then number 3, I mean, he's defeated by having his bones buried in ground that's been consecrated with holy water. I mean, that's like, this is getting like the Catholic element is really getting.
You gotta get Exorcist is still known as the scariest movie of all time. Darth Vader is still the scariest person in the universe. You got to get in the Wayback Machine to 1987 and really think about plot devices and the age of people that were writing these scripts.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, this makes sense. Like I think this is useful context. I actually just rewatched The Exorcist, like the original one, for probably the first time in like 20 years. They were showing it at the Alamo Drafthouse, and
oh wow, how was that?
It holds up pretty well. It's actually, I actually liked it better than I remember liking it 20 years ago. It's, my line on this was always kind of like, well, maybe you needed a Christian upbringing to like really find it quite this. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't really find foul mouthed little girls that scary. But your
sister must have been a nightmare around that house.
But yeah, I will say, I mean, it is funny how much of that is in the movie. Like, there's a strong suggestion that like part of how like evil got in the house or started to manifest itself was that Reagan was playing with a Ouija board, and there's like there's a pretty unsubtle suggestion that part of how evil got into the house was that her parents were divorced. But
there's no father figure. The mom is like a career mom in Hollywood. Yeah,
exactly. But that said, just as a movie, I mean, just the sort of build up of atmosphere in the first part of the movie and everything. It's like, no, this is actually really good. I mean, props to this. Like, it's a good movie. I get why. And I feel like I get more now than I did why people have this, why it had that kind of role that it did, that people thought of it as the scariest movie of all time, etc. I don't know that I, found it scary exactly, but it is a very good movie. And yeah, so I do agree that it makes sense with that context that, where all of this stuff comes from. Although apparently from that video that I sent you, the only sort of mention of Holy Mother Church in the original Wes Craven's script was oh god, I get the girls at the asylum confused, but the first one, right, we're following around that that like her parents threatened to send her to Catholic school. I mean, that's it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So JG, you have the floor now to talk about why you think part 4 is the best in the series.
There's something about part 4 and the MTV vibes to it. Like I said, the Dramarama soundtrack. I actually
double down on the MTV vibes.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
The
this was
3 was a hit.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think that was when it was released. That was the same year they did. I mean, they did this twice, but they had Freddy host MTV for Halloween.
Yep.
This is also the time when you're getting Freddy's Nightmares in syndication. So, people are buying Freddy Krueger lunchboxes. There's just something about that movie, and I really like the teen element. For some reason, I love that cast of characters. I like Kristen better in part 4. Arquette's
You don't
cool,
like
but
Arquette?
I love Tuesday Night's my favorite. She's one of my favorite girls in these movies. So.
You don't like Art? Wait a minute.
I like Arquette. I didn't say I didn't like Arquette.
How does Arquette? You don't like the hot Arquette?
I like the hot Arquette. I like Tuesday Night. I like the.
Is she the
like me?
hot Arquette? Or you're not allowed to say that? This is also streaming on your channel.
Yeah, I like her. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's like, look, there's an obvious sense in which 4 is, not a great movie. It's like trying to even reconstruct and explain to somebody what the plot of it is a little bit difficult. The way that it starts is like, one, it just completely, both literally and metaphorically pisses on number 3. The way Freddy, that like
The dog.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like, there's the dog pees on his grave, and that's apparently enough to cancel out the power of God and release him back into everybody's dreams. And then, like, after all that stuff in number 3 about how they all have these special dream powers and they can band together and defeat him and, believe themselves. And then, like, the first, 20 minutes of number 4 is like, nah, never mind. Actually, he's going to
kill the black guy in the first 5 minutes.
Squash you all like bugs, But all of that said, like, I also kind of get what you're saying. It's like, I
feel like it's a back to basics Freddy movie, whereas 3 was much more of a spectacle. Yeah.
Yeah. And like number 4, like does have, whatever you think about the plot or anything like that, and it does have like some of the most memorable scenes in the entire franchise.
Right. That whole set piece that Screaming Mad George, the special makeup effects guy, did, the cockroach motel.
Yeah.
That's still one of the craziest scenes. The cockroach motel.
And the scene we were trying to find, right? The thing with the movie theater and the pizza, and the souls as the like sausages on the pizza. It's like, yeah, come on, that's fantastic.
I get Nightmare mixed up with that Nightmare and that woman. Is she the same woman that's in Friday the 13th 7 and 8 or 6 and 7?
The one that plays Alice?
Yeah.
I don't think she's in the Friday movies. I only know her.
Different ones. They look so much alike.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, she does look like Lar Park Lincoln from Friday, The New Blood.
Can we just give JG his props for knowing all the actors' names in these movies?
I've met half these people.
I don't give a damn if they're in your living room right now putting Cheeto crumbs on your couch. The fact that you can rattle off these names, I'm a pretty, Ben Burgess will tell you, I've seen my fair share of mediocre films, and I love them all. I forget names left and right. There's only a handful of names I know. JG, you know the names of actors that were in, like, the name of the second grip in Sleepaway Camp 4. Like, the names that you know.
That's true.
It's impressive as fuck. Again, hug your children, people.
I'd be a different person if that happened.
Yeah, I'm just looking through her filmography here. So yeah, I don't think she was in any of that. Weirdly enough, it does look like she had a role in Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, really?
Did she come back for that?
Apparently she did. Yeah, I'm trying to find exactly who she was, because I do not definitely
Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, there's something that none of us have said so far. Nightmare on Elm Street revitalizes what many people see as a dead genre because of the massive backlash that Silent Night, Deadly Night got.
Yeah,
with Santa Claus being a murderer.
Right.
Again, Wes Craven has these like I guess, more cerebral movies, not in the Cronenberg way, because I don't know too many people that think of Cronenberg as horror, even though I think of it those movies.
Well, I mean, it depends on the movie a little bit, but yeah.
But Craven is the Cronenberg for low budget horror movies, I guess, if that makes any sense. And he was able to revitalize the genre where they literally start bringing back people that we forgot about. I mean, for a lot of people, Leatherface, I don't think he had a name in the first one.
No, he didn't. He was just Leatherface. Yeah.
He doesn't have a name. And you get Leatherface 2. You get they bring the Friday the 13th series back. I don't want to say Jason Voorhees because they don't bring back Jason Voorhees automatically. So
yeah,
these movies are
back. Yeah, but yeah.
You know, the fact they brought this stuff back just off the strength of one film.
Right.
But the sad thing is the derivatives of the Nightmare movies. Yikes.
Right.
Yikes. Is it Sorority House or Slumber Party Massacre?
Slumber Party Massacre 2 with the Rockabilly Killer.
The Rockabilly Killer is the worst horror movie person in the history of horror movie people. Have you ever seen Slumber Party Massacre 2? Sorority?
No.
It's Slumber Party Massacre 2. Yeah.
You can watch the first one. It's good. It's actually really good. The second one, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, the first one is actually like a sort of feminist parody of the slasher. Yeah.
The first one is entertaining. The second one, you're like, the second one is filled with scenes of the first one.
Always a bad sign.
You know, something I was going to say about Elm Street 4, and I think this is why I like it a lot, is just, as someone who went to film school, I appreciate that movie because it's it's like a little engine that could story, the making of it, because, you know, first off, it's made by Rennie Harlan, right? Who ends up becoming a big director doing one of the Die Hard movies. And, you know, he knows how to make a good action film or a genre film, but that movie ran out of its budget. You know, that scene where they do the fight between Freddy and the Karate Kid character played by Andres Jones.
Yeah.
That wasn't originally what they were going to do. They were going to have him fall into the abyss through an elevator, and they just didn't have the money for it. And in spite of running out of the money, I think they made just a fun little movie, you know, and it really is a fun movie for me. I really enjoy it. And I think the fact that they were able to pull off a fun movie while really running out of funds, like I think halfway through, is something that just the sort of filmmaker guy in me is like, I respect that.
While I have you guys here, I want to ask you this. I want to put you on the spot and ask you this. Can we do a show for Christmas? We don't have to do a live stream. We could pre-record it. Why Die Hard, Gremlins, and Lethal Weapon are Christmas movies? Can we do a show?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll absolutely do that.
You guys saw it here first. That's
yeah, for sure. Is the time loop scene, is that 4 or 5?
That's 4.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where they leave the restaurant, her and the new boyfriend, and they're like, wait, we did that before. Yeah. The deja vu scene, as I call it.
Yeah. No, that's I mean, that's definitely that one. The pizza scene, the cockroach. I mean, they like it does. Again, for a movie that like the actual story is kind of a strange mess, and the way that it sort of fits into the continuity of the series is very strange. Like it does have like a remarkable concentration of like the best scenes in the series.
I was going to say too, the effects by. So Screaming Mad George, I mentioned, did the effects for the Cockroach Motel, but Steve Johnson, who did the rest of the effects, including the chest bursting scene, which there's an interesting anecdote about that. I think the effects work really well. The chest burster scene where Linnea Quigley, the famous Scream Queen, pops out of Freddy's chest at the end, along with all these other souls. It's funny to me that when she popped out of his chest, they yelled cut, and Steve Johnson, the head special effects guy, went up to Linnea and said, he got down on one knee and said, will you marry me? and she was covered in goo this whole time. And then a part of the set, I think I'd have to look this up again, but they almost died on set because like one of the special effects rigs almost broke.
Jesus.
But luckily they lived, and then she was like, I do. So I mean, but I love the effects in it. Yeah.
They're still married?
They got divorced a few years later, but
didn't she marry Stephen Baker too?
I don't think so. I haven't talked to Lene in a while, but she mainly has talked about her relationship with Steve Johnson, the special effects guy on 4. But yeah, it's the effects in it, I think, work really well. You had two of the best special effects people of the 80s in the form of Steve Johnson and Screaming Mad George. People forget, I mean, Steve Johnson's the guy that did Slimer in Ghostbusters.
Kevin Yeager isn't in 4?
No, I don't think Kevin Yeager was doing, I think, the Child's Play movies, and then he eventually did Hellraiser.
He did too.
Okay. Did I say Kevin? I meant I may have said Kevin Johnson. I meant Steve Johnson.
That's what you said. You said the name right. I said
okay.
I asked about Kevin Yeager because I know he did the Child's Play movies. I swear Kevin Yeager made the big Freddy snake in 3. I could be wrong.
That's the weird thing. A lot of these movies do end up blending together. For as much as I'm like a huge horror movie fan, I sometimes mix these movies up too.
Yeah, I mean it's easy to do. I mean, because like there's so much of the imagery that's like it's cool, but it could be anywhere. As you were saying, it's like, hold on, I know this movie pretty well. Big Freddy Snake. Where's this in 3?
This is when he has Kristen. Is that her name or Tina? Kristen. He's got her in his mouth.
Oh, yep.
Her down, and then he sees Nancy, and he goes. Nancy snaps him in the eye, and she goes, "You."
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. I swore that was Kevin. I could be wrong. Also, there was a handful of guys that were working, and they were working a lot. So that's why a lot of these, to me, that's why a lot of these things are going to blend together, because you have a small clique of dudes that are making all these special effects for these films.
No, that's very true. I've talked to Gary Tunnicliffe, who did the special effects for Hellraiser, and he's like, yeah, it was weird in the 80s and 90s, man, because we were all competing with each other. So we'd talk behind each other's back, and then we'd be working with each other. The next day, it was a very dog-eat-dog world for special effects people at that time.
But there was a lot of work for him.
Yeah, there was. The other thing I was going to say about Elm Street 4, I think the other thing I like about it, and I know, Ben, I get what you mean by the story isn't the best, but I really like Alice's character arc. She goes from this like quiet, diminutive girl to like really embracing, this new reality where, I mean, she's sort of absorbing the powers and character traits of her friends that have been slashed by Freddy. And there's something about her character arc that I really like. I don't know what it is. Like I wouldn't say it's like a feminist character arc, but she finds her like inner power. Yeah. And there's something I relate to about that character.
I mean, in a weird way, it's like a remix of the Dream Warriors idea that like rather than like everybody finding their things or whatever, it's like she's becoming cumulatively all of them.
Now let's go to Nightmare 5. The Dream
Child. Yeah.
Dream Fetus.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
It's the Dream Fetus. There's no song. What's the song for part 5?
Yeah, I don't know.
JG, who's got the song?
Oh, I don't remember the main song for part 5.
There is something that's like really weird about Jason, you and I have talked about this, about like the fact that like they decided to make 3 through 5 continuous with each other, which is like they did not need to do that. They could have done like pretty much everything the same for all these movies without doing that. And the fact that they are continuous with each other, so 4 starts out following around the people from 3, 5 starts out following around the girl from 4. Like it's like it makes you like there is this weird thing where it's like it kind of feels like it's like people, I think you said this, it's like she's like sitting around the pool with the brand new group of friends she made since like her previous group of friends was all massacred by Freddy 6 months ago.
Hella chill about it too. Remember we were joking about that shit at the house? We were like, they're like, we're your best friends. And we're like, you bitch, I just met you like a month ago.
Yeah, how many months could you possibly have been hanging out with these people, given the last movie we just saw? And then, and then it's also like, because every time it's like, ooh, I think it might be starting to happen again. No, you're crazy. That exact thing that's already happened to you twice, like that surely couldn't be happening again now.
I'm looking at the soundtrack right now, and oh my God. I'll read you there's 10 tracks. There's no way in the world you guys would ever guess who was on these. The first song is called Heaven in the Backseat by a group called Romeo's Daughter. You ever heard of them? That's got to be someone in the production Sons band. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter by Bruce Dickinson. I think this was the moment where Bruce Dickinson did some solo stuff and left Iron Maiden for a minute. Savage by Wasp. I know them.
I just looked at the soundtrack. I did not know Scully D is on the soundtrack for
I'm
this.
getting there. Can't Take the Hurt by Mammoth. Mammoth was Van Halen's original name. What You Don't Know About Rock and Roll by Slave Raider. That name is problematic.
Sure.
Anyway, I Gotta Swing It by Houdini. Now I Lay Me Down by Samantha Fox. Samantha Fox was like the white. She was Britney Spears and Taylor Swift before Britney Spears and Taylor Swift. Before Taylor Dane took her out of the game. Let's Go by Kool Mo D. Word Up Doc by Dr. Ice. Who the fuck is Dr. Ice? Where did he get his ice doctorate? Did he go to the same school as Dr. Mindbender? Living in the Jungle by Schoolie D. I don't know any of these songs. I wish we were in the champagne room so we could play these songs. Because I totally want to hear.
You can always do that.
I want to hear what Dr. Ice has to say. I want to know if What Up Doc is about his dissertation.
Yeah. So, number 5, Dream Child.
Not a good soundtrack.
Yeah. Real soundtrack decline, from Doc into all this.
Well, they literally, this was one of those movies where, like Halloween 4 to Halloween 5, they basically launched production on this immediately after Nightmare 4. I think it was like 2 weeks had gone by since Nightmare 4 came out. They're like, let's do Nightmare 5, get cast members from the fourth one. Let's do this quick. Very rushed production.
Yeah. Which is also kind of funny because it's the same point in both series, right? Because Halloween 4 was the return of Michael Myers, which is like feels kind of similar to like what Dream Warriors was doing in the overall scheme of the Nightmare movies.
I can't wait to read you guys Part 6 soundtrack.
Okay, well we'll get to that.
Keep on 5.
Let's talk about 5. We get the we get this just surreal scene of the children taunting Freddy about the gang rape that fathered him. We get a lot more nun stuff in this one, a lot more Amanda.
I was going to say that stuff's really dark too with the nun, right?
Yeah.
Like they're literally showing the maniacs descending upon her. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, this is really true. What do you guys think about the child actor?
I mean, that's my response. I always forget how much he figures into the movie for some reason.
Yeah,
the stuff I remember are the kills.
Yeah,
Dan's kill, which, like I said, it's really weird. So Dan's kill, Mark's kill, and the Greta kill were all cut for the theatrical version, and for some reason you can only get. It's not just the Laserdisc. The original first VHS release is also uncut, but this movie was going to be rated X initially.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I mean, especially Greta's kill. That's the girl with the like, she's too skinny, like the bulimia type issue. There is just some really dark stuff in this movie, in my view,
Yeah.
it's really weird because it's also like very goofy,
Uh,
but it also has like some really weird, like gothic and like mean spirited elements. It's just a very, the tone is very schizophrenic.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Right. So yeah. So Alice, I'm just kind of reminding myself of the plot with the summary here, that she starts out, so she's graduated from high school, which is, for whatever reason, it's not an intrinsically memorable scene, but it's one of the ones that sticks in my head. The let's blow this popsicle stand, high school graduation speech. And she's with her, she's with her new friends, right? Her old group of, best buddies, all have been killed by Freddy. So Greta, yes, the aspiring but reluctant supermodel. So yeah, because her mom is the one who's kind of making her do that. Mark, a comic book fan, and Yvonne, a hospital volunteer and swimmer. So Yvonne is the one, if I'm remembering right. We were remember the thing we did on Halloween. Jason asked if Freddy was racist, and at first I said no, I don't remember him saying any racist stuff. Well, even when he was killing black people, it's like, no, wait, this is the exception, right? He says something like, how sweet dark meat or something like that.
I think he says that in Freddy vs. Jason as well.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Actually, maybe I'm
Yeah.
just conflated the two right now. But I am thinking of Freddy vs. Jason. I don't think he actually says this in number 5, so that's fair. But yeah, so she is on her way to work. Alice finds herself back in the asylum, where she sees Amanda giving birth to a gruesomely deformed baby. Yeah, he's sort of in this like dream sequence. Baby Freddy kind of looks like an alien from the Alien movies.
Yeah, I love Baby Freddy, to be honest.
Yeah.
He's such a grody looking dude.
No, it's a fun detail. Let's see.
Since you mentioned the Yvonne thing, I thought it was interesting. I think a lot of people will talk about how so many 80s horror movies, the first person to go is the black cast member, the black character.
Right,
and it's funny because this is actually an exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yvonne survives. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I wonder, it's like, because that is such a cliche. I wonder how true that is if anybody's actually sat down and, done the definitive, watch through of a bunch of these movies to see how often the black guy actually does die first. I guess within these movies, that's the case for number 4. But then again, he's only in number 4 because he survived all the way to the end of number 3.
Oh yeah, with Kincaid. Yeah,
exactly. Right. That he's the first one to die. I think right in number 4. But again, he obviously survived 3. But yeah, that's let's see. So Amanda tries to collect the baby before it escapes, but sneaks out of the operating room. Alice follows the baby into the church where she defeated Freddy in the previous film. The baby finds Freddy's remains and quickly grows into an adult, hinting to Alice that he has found the key to coming back. Which, is also, by the way, maybe something that's worth pausing on, while we're waiting for Jason to come back, that there is something funny about like contrasting the different movies and how much effort they either do or don't feel the need to put in to explaining how he comes back, or whether like sometimes it's just like, yeah, whatever, he's back, don't worry about it.
No, I definitely I agree with that. I think by part 5, it's gotten to the point where, I mean, part 4 they didn't really explain how he comes back. They're just like dog piss. So
Yeah, exactly right. Like, yeah. Part 4. I mean, I guess that is technically sort of an explanation, but like, what the mechanics of that are, anybody's guess. And then in 5, I guess if he's hinting that he's found a key to coming back, so this whole thing is that like somehow or another
he's coming back through the child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
He's like, in a weird way, he's like seducing the child over to the dark side, sort of like a Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it is very much played like that over the course of the movie. That there's like the scene, like later in the movie, there's the stuff where he's like hanging out like the child, right? He's still a fetus in the real world, but he's like a little kid in the dreams. Has like these like real dark pouches, on his eyes, and and he's starting, he's starting to look a little creepier, because of the Freddy influence over the course of the movie.
It's been a while since I've seen this. Isn't there a whole subplot that's sort of very Reagan America about, isn't she wondering if she's going to get rid of the kid or not?
Yeah.
Like have an abortion? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I think that, so yeah, let's see. So alarmed, she contacts Dan, who falls asleep en route to see her. That's right. Yep. So there's the, this is the scene where, as I was filibustering, waiting for you to get back, we were going through much more of a beat by beat description of the movie than we've been doing for any of the other.
Of 5? Are you on?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everybody. It's been very dry here, and Ben can attest to this. It's an odd climate. So even though I live next to the ocean and it's relatively warm, it's also really dry.
Yeah, and, I mean, it's literally desert.
Yeah, cactus grows wild here. And so I go running, and I didn't really think anything of it. I mean, lately I've been having these horrible nosebleeds, so my nose exploded on air. So I wanted to,
which would have been thematically appropriate.
I don't. People always assume that I drink and do drugs, and I don't want people thinking that I had a Brooklyn podcaster nosebleed. This is truly
okay. Sorry, that one took me by surprise.
I know we've been going through this movie beat by beat while we were waiting for Jason to come back.
Granularity.
So, no, what I wanted to mention was I love the opening of this movie, like the opening credits. Because I remember I was watching it about a year ago, and my brother walked in, and he may have been somewhat inebriated, and he was just laughing hysterically. And he says to me, "What is this? So, like the opening of a Skinamax movie? Like the whole movie, the whole opening." The opening credits is like Alice and Dan, doing the sexy with each other to like this weird blue lighting. And you're like, what is this late time HBO Skinamax territory we're in?
So as we move on to part 6 in the original movies, Freddy's dead, right? Because now the slasher movie is overdone it. Right, that we've oversaturated the slasher market as well. The soundtrack is filled with some bands that maybe you've heard of. I'm Awake Now by the Goo Goo Dolls. The Goo Goo Dolls.
That was like a before they were famous thing.
Well, they were on Metal Blade. I believe their first what's that hit?
No, they were on Metal Blade at the time.
Yeah, they were on Metal Blade because Metal Blade was trying to get with the new style, because again, a lot of things were getting out of vogue. Goo Goo Dolls has 3 songs on this soundtrack. Fate's Warning has a song on this soundtrack. Do you remember Fate's Warning?
No.
Kind of proggy metal band. And you know who did the score of part 6?
Graham Revell, I think, did it.
Queen's Brian May.
Okay. Oh, I was thinking there was an unused. They actually had 2 scores, and one of them went unused. I always forget that Brian May did the soundtrack.
I totally didn't realize that Brian May did the score for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. That must have been a favor or someone knew, or they had some budget money, or like, you know what, we really need a Brian May score for this. There's a best of Nightmare on Elm Street soundtrack. Did you know that?
Oh, really?
Brian May, Jay Ferguson, Craig Saffin, Christopher Young.
Yeah.
Part 6 is definitely so over the top that it was hard for us to watch, and we knew what we were watching. When being,
You know what I always say that this, and people look at me when I say this if they don't know about the making of it or who made it, but I always tell people Freddy's Dead is the John Waters movie of the franchise. No, and that's true because Rachel Talalay, who directed it, and I like Rachel's films a lot. I think she's a very quirky director. She went on to do Tank Girl, which is a sort of 90s favorite for me, and I think a lot of Gen Xers that are into cult films. But, you know, she got her start working with John Waters on movies like Hairspray and Crybaby, and you can definitely see a sort of John Waters-esque tone throughout this movie. It's not my favorite of the franchise, but I do kind of like the offbeat nature of it.
oh, look, someone's on the screen saying like this. I don't know this person's name. Kago Tiao. Kakatao says, not that Brian May. Soundtrack Brian May is Australian. Soundtrack Brian May needs to change his fucking name.
Yeah, I'm with you, JG. I have like a big soft spot for number 6 just because like Freddy's Dead, just because it just, I don't know, in some weird way it just goes for it to like in a much more extreme way.
I like the, you know what I did like about Freddy's Dead that I thought was kind of cool was the kids are gone and the parents are crazy.
Yeah,
Johnny Depp cameo.
Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold.
Tom Arnold had a cameo.
Alice Cooper, right?
Alice Cooper plays Freddy's dad.
Yeah. And then like the guest starring role from Yaphet Kotto. There's a lot of recognizable
Doesn't Freddy
faces
beat his
actually.
wife in 6?
I think there's
Yeah,
actually
he
an
does.
implication
Yeah.
that he kills his wife. Like
He definitely beat her. He actually hit her in front of the kid.
Yeah, he hit her in front of the kid, and you see that in the flashbacks. Yeah,
but there's like there's like a scene where he's like she's like seems to have found out about something, and it's like very ominous. I think there's like a strong insinuation that he kills her, but yeah, no, I mean it's like just the way that it like I don't know. I mean I can't like even though yes it is Freddy has become fully Bugs Bunnified in this one. He's like any sort of trace of the creepiness, whatever number 1 is like long since gone, whatever. But like just something about again, just the way it's going for it, like just how over the top, like the fact that it starts with this like long quote from like Nietzsche about dreams. And then welcome to primetime bitch, Freddy Krueger. And then like this scene where it's like it's the Wizard of Oz scene with Freddy on a broomstick.
Freddy is the Wicked Witch. Yeah. I always remember the part where he, I think John Doe is falling from the sky, and then Freddy is like pushing with his back the bed of spikes or whatever it is, and I'm like, he is literally Wile E. Coyote in that scene, you know. Yeah, I will say this: there is one kill in this movie that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
Which one is
the Carlos kill? So Carlos was the dude with the hearing aids, and for anything involving ears or eyes, ocular horror and ear horror scares the crap out of me.
Can't fuck with the Italians, dude. If you're trying, look, if you're gonna watch it, Ben hasn't seen a lot of Italian horror, and we'd be done with our day and everything. We're gonna try to watch a horror movie, but trying to watch Italian horror as you're kind of dozing off, not cool to try to watch Fulci when you're dozing off, because you're gonna see.
Yeah, you don't watch Zombie while you're dozing off, and then you wake up with the eyeball scene and the.
I would rather listen to the song Zombie on repeat than watch the Fulci Zombie going to sleep. People are talking about the ear thing. Yeah, the ear thing was actually scary.
Yeah, it's weird because it's done in a comic way where he's scratching the chalkboard and saying "ooh ah," but for some reason as a kid I was like, "ooh, this is actually creepy."
Oh, this is what I wanted to ask you. Someone brought it up. So you say you like part 6. Did you enjoy the floating sperm?
Yeah, the three dream demons, which is why by
No.
the way, in
Dream
the yeah, no, well, it makes sense because the previous movie had a dream fetus, so it's like now there's the sperm. We're going backwards. Yeah, no, in I remember I used to have the DVD box set where like the spines of all the DVDs like came together to form this image of Freddy like turned around and it's like trench coat and fedora, and it came with the set of 3D glasses because of the dream sperm scene. Yeah, I like just the brazenness of the fact that it's number 6 and they're introducing this whole like layer of mythology that's like never been even remotely hinted at whatsoever in the first 5 movies.
This is what's happening with these films. They're creating mythologies. Michael Myers has to get a whole mythology created around him.
Like the Thorn cult and all that.
Yeah, that becomes a problem for a lot of the fans of the movie when they have to create the whole demonic shit with him. Freddy gets a whole huge mythology, which is the bulk of the story in 6. That kind of wasn't there before. You made a point a long time ago when I mistakenly commented on someone's post on Instagram, and I learned my fucking lesson. There was and I know you know this story, JG. Almost 20 years ago, there was this fake news article that came out and said a black woman had won like $1 billion settlement because she was the original author of the Terminator series and the Matrix series. I don't even think it was.
Yeah, I think her name was like Sophie or Sophie Stewart.
Yeah, and she had wrote a book, but it definitely wasn't those same things. She didn't win a lawsuit. She did bring a lawsuit. She didn't win. She actually had to pay because she lost. But she did go on TV and talk about it. I don't know why. I don't know who would have someone that lost a lawsuit come on TV, but I had responded about that that narrative, and I forgot where I was going with this, and I got all this pushback. Oh fuck! What were we just talking about, Ben? It fell out with all the blood in my nose.
So we're talking about the dream demons and like the new mythology.
The mythologies around that shit. Ben had made a point when I was getting like every day I would get all these like hundreds of comments about why I was a piece of shit for saying the lady didn't write it. And Ben goes, if you watch those movies, you can see that they were never made for sequels.
Oh my god, yeah. Like
the Matrix, the Terminator.
The fact that she was claiming not just like it would have been one thing if she was even claiming that she'd like written like Terminator and the Matrix, fine, right? But like the Matrix especially, like the ending of that first movie could not have been clearer that there were not supposed to be sequels. I mean, it was over. They'd like the last line of dialogue is like, I'm making a call and every phone in the world is going to answer. It's like, yeah, that's it, right? You're done. And you know, even the Terminator in a different way. It's like these things weren't built for like, you know, like they were successful enough they you know came up with sequels, but it's just very funny that like she has to like overplay it and claim that she wrote not only the thing but the sequel is if they were all written at the same time.
She created the whole universe. It's
it's weird because I think she claimed Terminator ripped her off, but it's fun. I always found that funny because Harlan Ellison, I think, actually won his lawsuit against the people who made Terminator. Yeah.
If you watch,
he was like, they ripped me off.
Terminator,
he didn't win.
There's a there's a settlement. If you watch it in the credits, there's like this very carefully worded line in the credits about how like we'd like to acknowledge the works of Harlan Ellison, which is like, okay, you could really feel like the lawyers negotiated about the wording there, right? That it's like they're not acknowledging wrongdoing or anything, but it's like they're doing something that, you know, apparently was enough to satisfy them.
Yeah, Stevie says forced franchises, and that's that's kind of how I feel with these movies as well. Wes Craven had no idea he was going to have a franchise with
Well,
this.
no, in fact, I mean, this is why like he didn't want there to be a sequel, because he was like, no, I told the story, it's over.
And Rob Shea, on the other hand, the producer, was like, no, we have to. That's why they changed the ending of the original, and you have the goofy doll at the end,
going through the
Ronnie Blackley's doll. That is something that is true about this franchise. I mean, there's a reason that New Line kept making these, and why New Line has been called the house that Freddy built.
Yeah.
Rob Shea saw a lot of money in this, and I think Rob does like the franchise. He even has a cameo in Freddy's Dead. I think he holds it pretty dear to his heart. But really, I mean, this is a franchise that's about how can we milk this cow? Make more cash.
What was he doing
Totally.
before
I mean,
Freddy?
I was really surprised. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for Jason to roll out like a Bob Shea impression that would just be his standard like
Old Jewish guy,
1940s cigar chomping, vaguely anti-Semitic caricature of like movie executive.
First of all, Ben,
to be fair,
there's no vague.
To be fair, Shea and New Line did do stuff before Freddy, right? Like,
but
they were involved in getting John Waters' Pink Flamingos out there, but they were kind of like an art house.
They were made no money, and he was doing like instructional films and shit like that. He made no money, and by the time they do Freddy, it's such a massive profit for them. Like these Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th make so much freaking money for the studios. Like we have to remember, and these are little studios you need another one. And the original directors were like, I don't want to make another one. I want to do something I want to do. And look at John Carpenter talk about Halloween Part 2 all the time. I got a 12-pack of beers and I wrote the screenplay. That's why it's all in a hospital. I didn't want to do it. Wes Craven doesn't get really involved until 10 years later. Because they didn't see these movies as franchises, and by the time they want to get involved, it's like, man, it's too late. Like if Carpenter could have had his wish and they made Halloween an anthology series, because I went back and watched Halloween 3 again. I really think that's a good movie.
I mean, it doesn't make a lick of sense, but it's a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny too that it's like that the movie that he didn't want to write, that it was just like, fine, fuck it, I'll shit something out, includes the plot twist that like grounds the entire rest of the series, right? Like that, about Laurie, So yeah, I mean, I think that it's like that probably, I don't know. I mean, I really like some of those later movies, but it's like, yeah, that probably objectively would have been better if they were just like, hey, let's just make an unrelated horror movie that's set on Halloween every time.
I do think that's an important point, though, you make, Jason, that some people overlook. I think some people sometimes forget how much money these movies made, because they'll think, well, it didn't make like Jurassic Park money, like how Jurassic Park made that money in the 90s. And I'm like, yeah, but these were movies made on like, a $2 million budget, and that's making, 20 million back. I mean, it's making,
30,
all its
40,
money back.
$50 million. They're making $1 million budgets. Carpenter, the budget for the original Halloween is $300,000. It made like almost $100 million, I think.
Yeah. And not only that, but like, I mean, people forget Carpenter tried to come back to Halloween even after Halloween 3.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a Halloween 4. It was actually going to be written by Dennis Etchison. That was going to bring in, of all people, Joe Dante to direct.
I saw that.
And it would have had a kaiju Jason, or kaiju Michael Myers at the end. But Michael Myers and or John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were going to be involved in that. There's always been attempts by John Carpenter to get that franchise back, even to the point where he wanted to do a Michael Myers in space movie at one point.
I mean, Carpenter,
and with,
he's a weird.
I mean, why not? There was a Jason space movie.
Yeah.
Carpenter's out there, dude, and some of his movies that he makes, like We All Love the Thing. I'm so glad they didn't make another Thing, right? I just watched again.
I mean, there was the sort of weird prequel
90s phase.
reboot. thing.
Oh, that doesn't count. He didn't have his hand in that.
Yeah.
That was horrible. What's the movie that Carpenter? Not Prince of Darkness. The other one. In the
Gotta help me hear more.
JG.
In the Mouth of
In
Madness.
the Mouth of Madness. I watched that the other.
I was confused because I thought you were. It's weird. Carpenter. It's like there's vintage '80s Carpenter, '70s and '80s, and then you get to the '90s, and it's much more.
It's muddled Carpenter.
Even in the '90s, though, he had a few. I mean, In the Mouth of Madness is good. That's good stuff there. I was going to say too about Craven. I think Craven regretted not making as much money as he thought he deserved for the original Elm Street, because even before he comes back for Wes Craven's New Nightmare, he does the movie Shocker with Mitch Pileggi as this serial killer who dies and travels through the TVs to kill kids. But that movie is basically him trying to create a new Freddy Krueger character that he can have full creative control over and make all the money on. So everyone was trying to milk these
only
franchises
one person's
for what
been able to do that, and her name is Taylor Swift. I don't know if you guys know about Taylor Swift. She literally got the masters to one of her biggest selling records back, and just she remastered it. She remastered her biggest record and put it out with like a couple new songs, which who knows if they're new songs, just like here you go. But every time you see someone like, we have the remastered, it's because they got the rights back to their stuff and they want to cash in on this hit that they weren't able to control before. And it's harder to do with movies. And that's a really great point that Wes Craven tried to do with Shocker, and it just didn't hit because we already had Freddy and he was already established for like 10 years at this point. Or not 10, maybe like 7 years, but he was an established thing.
Oh, he was super established. I mean, by the time they did, the movie we were just talking about, right? Freddy's Dead. I actually hadn't known this until something I was looking at to write the Jackman article, but it's like they actually, they did a actual funeral for Freddy at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Which is the cemetery I adopted my cat from. I was one of some kittens that were.
I love the Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Yeah. They posted on their Facebook page that they had like a bunch of kittens they were feeding there who needed home.
Well, I was going to say the mayor of LA at the time announced that it would be
Freddy Krueger Day.
The film. Yeah.
Which is this is our. This is the mayor of Los Angeles going to declare a day for a fictional serial killer who kills children.
Hey, it's better than Pennsylvania that has a whole statue of a fake boxer.
What's interesting, and I guess
they've never had a real boxer there. So.
Yeah, never. Nobody from Philadelphia has ever boxed. They're not a racist city at all. That Bill Burr bit where he just rips into Philadelphia while they boo him is still one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. The Shocker soundtrack has Megadeth on it. That's all. That's all you need to say. Covering "No More Mr. Nice Guy" before Marty Friedman gets in the band. Did you know that? They're a 3-piece, and there's a shot of 3 of them. You see Nick Menza, Dave Ellison, and Dave Mustaine. And Penelope Spheres said that she did the video for that. She said Dave Mustaine was so fucked up that he couldn't play and do the singing, lip syncing at the same time. That's why it's not shot. There's a shot of his face singing the words, and there's a shot of his fingers playing because he was just so messed up. 1988 was a magical year. Wes Craven's Shocker is what they called it. I wanted to like Shocker so bad.
I love Shocker.
Oh, Horace Pinker didn't do it for me. Do you remember Shocker, Ben, or is that one of those movies you weren't allowed to see?
Well, I wasn't allowed to see any of them, but I did. It's not one that I ever got around to seeing. I've never seen Shocker.
I'd like to get your take on Shocker when you finally get to see it. I think you could stream Shocker, can't you, JG?
I don't know. I just have the DVD of it.
Oh, by the way, Ben, JG doesn't stream shit. He just has a DVD and VHS collection that rivals any store you've been to in the most mysterious parts of LA.
Yeah, I mean, I admire that. I mean, I think there's something, as we talked about many times. I mean, it's like there's something that I really, um, Jason's heard me talk about this, but I mean, JG, there's a essay that I really like by Freddy called "It's So Sad When Old People Romanticize Their Past." Also, the 1990s were objectively the best time to be alive, and it's something he talks about in there. But it's like, I mean, he's not talking. I actually don't even think this is a specific example he uses in there, but I mean, it's like the general drift of what he's talking about in there. Like, it's like, I miss the shit out of video stores. Like, I think that is just a better way to relate to the experience of watching a movie at home. That, like, you go like that, that you go out. It's like this like thing that you're doing. You leave the house, you're looking around, you're making a selection. The selection means something. It's not, it's not that like every other movie that's ever been made is also at your fingertips, literally like a couple of clicks away. Like that's yeah. No, I think it's I think it's maybe the golden mean between not having home video and having what we have now.
Right.
The video store, and we've talked about this before, and let's talk about it again. I don't care. The video store and the record store were such magical places for me. And I still love to go into record stores. When Shaka Kani and I go to TJ, there's a tons of record stores that actually have videos and DVDs in them. And just like, sadly, I don't have any way to play these things, but just like looking at them, and I still get the same kind of excitement whenever I see certain album covers. Seeing an album cover digitally is not the same as seeing the tape or the record or the long box CD with the picture on the back and reading the liner notes and all that fun stuff, and going to the video store to wait, like we were talking the other day about, like waiting at Blockbuster for the movie that you want to see, or any video store, because it had to be back by midnight, and they would tell you, we have 3 of these coming back.
Yeah, like, I remember that.
I will wait.
Yeah.
I will wait, and they better not be late. Like, that experience is so different to now, when we all are going to get off the screen, except for JG and his massive collection of hard copy films, and dick around for an hour and a half, watch 50 minutes of trailers before we watch the same thing we've watched 100 times.
That is probably literally what I'm going to do. Yes.
So I just miss going down that aisle, that horror aisle, and being like, what the fuck is this? Because sometimes in the horror aisle will be all those crazy action movies that don't make any sense, that I also love way too much. Someone says one squad goes to Blockbuster for 2 movies. The other car goes to the gas station for snacks. That, Zach, you and your friends were good people. You guys had a true plan. That was a true plan. I
mean, to be fair, once we're in the Blockbuster era, less true of like just random video stores, but once we're in the Blockbuster era, they did have a bunch of snacks at Blockbuster also.
They did. Towards the end, they did.
Yeah. And it's like, it is something that's very, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm a little nostalgic for Blockbuster, but like, there's something that's very funny about people being nostalgic for Blockbuster. It's like, you're nostalgic for the thing that like wiped out the much better thing that there was before it.
It wiped out everything.
I mean, it killed a lot of indie sort of producers. I mean, I was lucky. I had a cult video store in Pittsburgh called Incredibly Strange Video that I was going there when I was like 12 years old, picking out the craziest movies. I wasn't even going to Blockbuster, but Blockbuster really killed a lot of like mom and pop operations.
This is the best thing right here. If we beat the game that night, we could trade it for another.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. I mean, in East Lansing, Michigan, where I'm from, there was Video to Go, which was a very good local indie video store. that was still in operation, like shockingly late. Like I think that was like I don't know, 2016 or something that finally went under. But the also, you know, by that time, right, I'd already spent so much of my adult life living other places that you know, I spent a lot of time living in places where Blockbuster was the only option, you know, like Miami.
They just, when they came in, it just was to be able to have that many new releases. And that's really what it was all about at that time, was about new releases. Because even though
Blockbusters.
Yeah. And as new releases were coming to video sooner in this area, we're talking about like the early 90s, and movies started getting slightly more expensive, to go to Blockbuster was like $2, $2.99, I think. And they had a wall of new movies. And they even if the wall of new movies was like the straight to video new movies that weren't going to hit cable yet. And you're like, oh, dude, we got to see this, you know, thing, this Die Hard knockoff with, you know, Eric Roberts and David Hasselhoff. Like, we gotta. This looks great. Look at the cover. There's an explosion. Like I miss that.
No, I have to say I miss it too, because even though I was really young at the time, I would walk past the video aisles, especially the horror section, and you would just see certain covers that would catch your eye.
Yes.
So like I always remember as a kid seeing the cover of the Brian Yuzna movie, The Dentist.
Yes.
And the, you know, this red cover with the woman's teeth out and all this other, and I'm like, there was just something I was like, what? Because there's something when you're young, it's like it feels forbidden to be looking at the horror movie section, you know. So it's, you know, it's something I miss too in a lot of ways, even though I was only around for like the tail end of it.
All my favorite metal bands, like all these metal bands, released VHSs in the 80s, and those were all at the video store too. That's how I got to see Motley Crue's uncensored video, and all the other they were like video magazines that used to come out. Do you remember those, Ben? Hard. I think they're all on YouTube.
Yeah, I do actually.
Hard and Heavy. Actually, again, if you're coming to see the live meet and greet, one of the stars of the Hard and Heavy video magazine, Craig LaCicero, will be there telling stories. You can ask Craig about being in it. So that's how I found bands, was like Hard and Heavy. They did a whole Bay Area edition, which I thought was like the coolest thing ever. And the video store, like, these movies have a special place for me because it's like the video store, the dollar movie. I don't know if dollar movies exist anymore in anybody's neighborhood.
I mean, there was also, I guess I should say, in cities when Blockbuster went under, that was just it, right? There were no more video stores. If you lived out in like a rural area, then oftentimes there actually was, partially because there was more of a market for it because of bad like broadband, that like there actually was this chain called Family Video that I think actually made it all the way until COVID. I think that's what finally killed it.
Oof.
Yeah. So like Houghton Lake, Michigan, they had a Family Video. But yeah, if you lived in a city, it's like you probably, unless it's like LA, which actually does still have a couple of video stores, like unless it's that, right? You probably haven't actually rented a video in a store since Obama was president.
Go for it, JG.
I was gonna say, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about. I know we're gonna get to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but it's interesting. A lot of people say that 90s era was like the death of horror and everyone was burned out by the slasher movie. I actually think that's like revisionist history because I think the reason, so Halloween 5 comes out in 89 and they do an ending where there's like a man in black, right? And they didn't know who is the man in black. So it took them 5 years to come up with a way to tie that plot hole up, to figure out what's the twist going to be in the 6th movie. And then Freddy's Dead wasn't really an example of the franchise being out of juice. That had the biggest opening week of any of the Freddy movies up until that point. It was later surpassed by Freddy vs. Jason. Paramount thought they were done with the Friday movies. Sean Cunningham, who basically owns the rights to the Jason Voorhees character after part 1, he realizes, I can do something with this. He goes to New Line with the new Jason movies that we get, like Jason Goes to Hell. And Jason Goes to Hell tries to set up for Freddy vs. Jason. And I think everyone was gunning to do Freddy vs. Jason as soon as they could. And just due to circumstances, it just didn't happen. So I feel like the reason a lot of the early 90s had a horror drought was just circumstances. And then Scream sort of changed everything. But even like, do you guys remember that Jim Carrey movie, The Mask?
Yes.
I actually just rewatched The Mask, like I think it was like 2 or 3 months ago. I actually think The Mask holds up. Like, it was just like a really weird, just like very specific nostalgia attack. Like, yeah, you know what I want.
There's a reason I mentioned it.
Yeah. It's like
that movie.
Actually,
that movie was initially, so that's a New Line movie.
Yeah.
New Line, initially, they're working on doing Freddy vs. Jason, right? They're thinking, how can we get that working? But we also want to be able to milk the horror movie stuff still. So The Mask was originally a property from Dark Horse Comics. And if you read the comics, it's really dark and messed up and not very lighthearted comedy. The original intention for The Mask was to create a new Freddy Krueger character for the 90s.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, and then Jim Carrey got involved, and that's when it became more of a comedy thing. So people that think the horror genre and the slasher genre in particular was out of juice by the early 90s, I don't think it was that. I think it's just different circumstances happened where in that period from, the early 90s to like 95 and 96 with Scream, the Scream sort of just changed the script on everyone. And that's when you get the sort of Dawson's Creek horror of Halloween H2O and whatnot.
You are a beautiful man for saying that. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a huge soft spot for the Dawson's Creek horror era. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, I just rewatched H2O. I always loved the first Scream movie. I always know what you did last summer, even. But yeah, I mean, so Jason and I did this whole episode on 90s horror, and it was like a 3-hour thing, and we
went through every movie from the 90 to 94. JG, we only did 90 to 94.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like kind of the thesis ended up being that it's like there is this thing where it's like, okay, so you mentioned like as evidence that it hadn't run out of juice, what a huge opening weekend Freddy's Dead had, which is true, although it's 91, right? So it's like very early in this. And there is this interesting thing that you do have like around this period, all of this stuff that like is super popular. That's like sort of horror adjacent crime fiction, Silence of the Lambs, stuff like that. And that when you do get the big slasher revival later in the decade, it's not, it's mostly not supernatural slashers anymore.
It's all meta.
Yeah, well, it's meta, but it's also just like, these are essentially just like, mundane serial killers who happen to be wearing masks.
The Noxzema girl's a serial killer. Remember in Urban?
Yeah, I like the first 2/3 of Urban Legends so much, and then like that twist. It's like that's not true. Like, no, I want you to recreate it for me. Show her lifting that guy up and like hanging the quarterback from the tree. I'm so curious about the physics of that scene.
That movie did not, for me, it just didn't do it. And they made 2 or 3 of those Urban Legends. They made 3, I think.
Yeah, there's 3 of them. And the third one, I had watched it recently because it was directed by Mary Lambert, who did the original Cemetery. And I was just shocked watching it because I'm like, I thought I like Mary Lambert as a director, and she worked with the Ramones, so she's cool. But I'm like, oh my God, this movie is not good.
It's the 90s is an interesting time to me because I think the feeling of the nation is just different. I really do believe in that end of history narrative definitely works its way into pop culture. And there's a lot of ding dong, the witch is dead for a lot of liberals. And these are the guys that are making these movies. And they finally got their victory, right? Reagan and Bush are finally out of office. And there's no more monsters for them. The Soviet Union is gone.
Yeah, and there really was like everything's fine for them. Like it is amazing, like to look back on how much liberals loved Bill Clinton back in the 90s. Like,
Oh man, I was thinking about this because I was trying to. So I got this little mini book out, and it's about cultures of deconstruction and authenticity, but a lot of it takes place in the 80s because it's about the beginnings of hardcore music, hardcore punk music. And 84 and 94 kind of big years for me, because in 84 you get the re-election of Ronald Reagan, which kind of becomes the death nail in those original bands, those original hardcore bands, because they were supposed to be this thing that were so like this was a movement that was anti the establishment, anti this conservative Reagan Thatcherite era, and it just nothing happened, right? And in 94, Kurt Cobain dies, who literally is the person, Nirvana is kind of carrying the flag for that hardcore movement, and that gets him into the mainstream. But around the time of his death, and it's all coincidental, I don't think it's any kind of conspiracy, Green Day releases their first record, and you get the emergence of a new genre that people are going to call pop punk. And you kind of get this safe for the mall music where we're not really lashing out at authority, or if we are, authority is mom and dad, which is why groups like Rage Against the Machine. I was talking to a producer of the show, M2 Sant. We're talking about how people look at hip hop as it's this always been this revolutionary music. And I'm like, it comes out of disco. How revolutionary can it really be? And we were talking about how the people that talk about it love to talk about themselves and the music as a revolutionary force. It definitely makes them way more important sounding. And you don't even have that in the 90s and 2000s, I think, because it's more like fuck you, mom and dad. And she goes, even people listening against Rage Against the Machine. I was like, everyone that I've met that's been a Rage Against the Machine fan, not one told me they were a communist.
I was going to say, I remember in high school, there was a kid that I knew that loved Rage Against the Machine. And he says to me, oh my God, Rage Against the Machine recommended this author, Noam Chomsky. And I said, yeah, I have some of Chomsky's books. And he says, can I borrow one? So I gave him Chomsky's book on neoliberalism.
Oh, okay.
He came back to me the next day, gave me back the book, and said, I can't read that. And I said, why? Chomsky is a communist. A lot of the people that listen to Rage are not as political as one would think.
What? Not one person has ever told me back in the day, oh yeah, I'm a communist. Rage speaks to me. It sounded like fuck you, mom, I won't do what you tell me. Even though the lyrics are very different. Shining Path is in one of their videos. It doesn't matter, right? There was a feeling in the air. As much as those guys were against the mall core, whatever you want to call it, they were part of it as well.
I was going to say, my favorite 90s band is Ministry. And I've always seen Ministry as a very political band. But the fact is, most Ministry fans are not
at all.
They're not into politics. They're into big, dumb guitars,
They're the most apolitical cats you'll ever be around, right? And this isn't a knock on Ministry or their fans. It's just, this was a moment for a lot of people where political education was for the eggheads. You kind of have to ask yourself this question: who wins at that end of history moment? Because the left kind of goes and retreats to academia, and they still kind of sit in a tower, in my opinion, and look down upon the minions. Conservatives won to a certain degree, even though Bill Clinton's in office, because he definitely espouses so many conservative values. There's a lot of bootstrapping in that first administration that people don't have a problem with. And even when you think about things like the crime bill, you have to think about other provisions that were written in there to kind of wave a hand to fairness. Like, oh, it's we hate crime act. We're going to give people longer sentences for racial violence. Even though you people aren't really facing racial violence, this isn't 1965, this is 1995. But just in case, we're going to crack down on that because this crime bill that we have here isn't racist at all. These are not the droids you're looking for. Though someone said the woman's protection from domestic violence is a total, very important part of that bill that people like Bernie Sanders signed on to. I know people that have benefited from that provision of the bill personally. But when we think about this moment and we think about the movies that we love and we think about this, the feeling of the country, there's a shift, in my opinion, to a collective sigh of relief. Go ahead, JG.
I was just going to say that's probably a good segue into Wes Craven's New Nightmare because you mentioned, sort of politics. People were retreating, right? They're just like, oh, that's for the eggheads. And it's weird to me because I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare is almost Craven trying to retreat into a philosophical position about horror. What I mean by that is that the thesis of that movie ends up being we need sort of our fictional horrors and our monsters and our nightmares because the real horrors will come to be if we don't. Like he's trying to make an argument for the value of horror as an art form. I think in that movie, I think there's a little bit of that in there. It's kind of a philosophical retreat within the Nightmare sort of franchise that I find very interesting. And it sort of mirrors what you're saying about there was a lot of retreat into the world of ideas on the political end. And I think that happens on the horror movie end with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where he's getting meta and trying to, I think, make a thesis about the value of horror as a medium with that movie. It's a very interesting movie because I don't really consider it a nightmare movie. I don't know what you guys think of that, but I always tell people that's not Freddy Krueger in the movie. In the movie, he's called the Entity.
It's not Freddy Krueger. That movie, I remember being in the theater with some friends because it comes out in 94, 95. And it blew me away. It blew me away in the theater. And I hadn't watched it. Maybe I watched it on like cable or something, but I hadn't watched it since Ben was over and we were doing our nightmare thing some months back. And Ben will tell you the whole time, I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. The pacing of that movie was great. I love the fact that everybody plays themselves in that movie. The earthquake element to it after there was a big earthquake in Northridge around that same time. And
they were filming it during those earthquakes too, I believe. That's
if you've lived in California and experienced an earthquake, especially a big one, they're rather frightening. There's nowhere to run.
Right. Yeah, and that's like it's like the thing KT Baldessaro told me about the being in the Purge election year and they're filming in Rhode Island and there's like actual non-movie related gunfire going on in the background. They're like, okay, it's good. It's ambiance. Don't worry. It's not close enough to us to hurt us.
Fuck that noise.
I was going to say real quick too, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is also weird because that movie ends up being much more restrained than it could have been. So what I mean by that is the original screenplay that I think Wes pitched is a lot weirder in some ways. Like he was actually going to play himself in that movie, but he was going to play a guy that lost his mind and now lives in a caravan with Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes. And he's like terrified of Freddy Krueger. And he literally like sews his eyes open so he can't sleep. And he's just obsessed with like not being killed by Freddy. So there was stuff in the original idea of Wes Craven's New Nightmare that gets much more toned down in the finished version. And in a weird way, I think it's the movie's benefit. It's a very strange movie though.
Very strange.
I could see that. Like I could see how that could actually be improved by the fact that it wasn't doing all that stuff. I mean, I think the balance the movie actually does strike is really good. I mean, it is an interesting point that it's like not a nightmare movie, not just in the sense that it's not set in the Nightmare on Elm Street universe, of course, but like, but that, yeah, it's a, it's, Freddy is like an avatar of the evil thing in that movie, but
Well, even his glove is different.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have the glove; he just has like the weird skeletal
Yeah,
hand.
it's hands. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. But like they do also do this thing, like they really sit with the grief of the loss of Heather Langenkamp's husband in a way that they never sit with anybody's loss in any of those movies. Like that's just like really foreign to what those movies are.
Also, that's another scene that scared the shit out of me as a kid. That's another thing. Ears, eyes, and groins. Do not go for the when they go for the special effects guy that's married to Heather Langenkamp and the claw is going after the guy's groin. I'm just no. Oh.
Because that's her real husband, right?
I actually don't know.
Her real husband's a special effects guy.
Okay.
Wes Craven special effects guy. He did the special effects for Serpent and the Rainbow.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, that's but I think they do have like a really good balance there because even though they are recreating a lot of the beats from the original movie, and it does again have that same kind of slasher fairy tale thing going on that the original did. That's obviously long since gotten lost in the original franchise. It's also, the whole real world element of it, like there is actually in a way some much creepier stuff going on in that movie, because of the constant endangerment of the kid, and what you sort of feel like, we were one of the, like you're always told from the first movie that Freddy Krueger before he died, right, was a child killer, but since dying and becoming supernatural, he seems to be like exclusively interested in sexy teenagers, not children.
Yeah, he's changed. He's grown. He's got a lot of time to mature and think about what he really wants, and he wants some experience.
Yeah. So like, whereas the entity that's manifesting as Freddy and New Nightmare actually is going after this little kid, which is like scary in a different way. And the sort of sense of like reality being violated, like, is scary.
There's a lot of interesting ways too that it builds a sense of dread that isn't built in the same way in the previous movies. So, it always sticks out in my head that I think the last scene where you see Robert Englund playing himself in that, he's on the phone and then he looks over and he sees the painting of Freddy Krueger that he was drawing. And then the next time you hear about Robert Englund, they're like, yeah, he booked it out of town, and it really builds that sense of dread. Like everyone is very nervous and
totally,
they feel something is wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're, and even the stuff that goes to the meta commentary that you were talking about, the way that it's sort of going to this, like, essentially his defense of horror movies, and that is, it's like,
well, the only way to stop the entity is to make a Freddy movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, essentially it's a version of like the oldest defense of fiction about upsetting subjects, right? Which is Aristotle and the Poetics, where he's talking about tragedy, and he says that you get it's a way to get catharsis of fear and pity by essentially bringing them up at a controlled setting so you can purge them. And it's very much echoing that, but like the fact that he is playing with that in that movie also gets like some of the most uncomfortable moments in the movie, like the doctor who's like, you let your child watch your movies?
I love that that's like a theme in the movie, that, because that was also still going on. There was still a lot of like, you're letting your kids do this with music. We're just getting out of the whole 2 Live Crew, getting banned, people going to jail, selling certain albums. That's still a thing when this movie comes out. Kind of have to remember that. it's funny to think about now when you have like number one songs that are literally about the color of your butthole. But there was a time.
Think back about how, like how worked up Tipper Gore was about Prince of all things. Yeah.
Like Prince. Wasp had a song called "Fuck Like a Beast."
Yes. Yeah.
And that's I remember seeing the cover for that, and it's like he had a cod piece with blades on it, and I was like, that doesn't seem like fun. Like this guy doesn't seem like he really wants to. Like, don't fuck that guy. Like, don't fuck the beast, man.
Yeah.
Not gonna work out well for you.
Yeah.
And
post a picture of yourself in the cod piece with the blades coming out on Tinder, and like nothing good's gonna happen.
Nothing good's gonna happen to you if you have the "Fuck Like a Beast" as your Tinder profile.
Yeah.
If I ever do another Tinder account, that will be my profile pic. It might work better than I had Pee Wee Herman and Clarence Thomas as my profile pic.
So it's also obviously since we were just talking a little while ago about about kind of later meta horror movies and all that stuff. Like at the end of the movie, the Freddy's temple, right, is like, I mean, that's like pretty clearly the inspiration for like the temple at the end of Cabin in the Woods.
I mean, this movie is also a direct line to Scream and what Scream's going to be.
Totally.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
And Scream comes out. There's two movies again. 1984, the horror genre gets revitalized with Nightmare on Elm Street. 1996, the horror genre, comes to life with Scream.
Yeah.
I mean, it even killed the cool covers.
What about Nightmare on Elm Street movies? Those were scary.
I know Wes Craven would make a point about saying, actually, I didn't write that line, but he sure didn't cut it.
No, I think he thought it was hilarious. But there's again, I think we don't look at slashers. We talked about this on the 90s show. Please go back and listen to that. Also, JG and I did a great interview with filmmaker Brian Yesna, talking about his movies Society and Reanimator and all those others. But there's something to be said about the 90s and the way we don't call horror. There's thrillers. Seven and Silence of the Lambs are two movies that everybody quotes. What's in the box?
Yeah, I mean they're very like, I mean they're definitely like Seven especially, right? That's like kind of gray horror, right? I mean it's like
it's gory as shit.
Yeah, no, I mean it's like in some ways the horror elements of it are like cranked up much more than most horror movies would be. I mean, I think if the material were handled differently, like we'd definitely think about it that way. I mean, it's like
Morgan Freeman is Mr. Horror in the 90s, but we don't call those horror movies.
Right.
They're murdering the shit out of women all over the woods.
Well, even on the lower rent end of that, right? Like all the indie, if you talk to a lot of indie filmmakers from the early 90s, people like Fred Olin Ray or Jim Wynorski, those people that came out of the sort of Roger Corman School of Hard Knocks indie filmmaking. I mean, it is true, as much as I said, I don't think the horror genre or slashers were entirely dead. In the early 90s, even on the low rent indie end, really things were moving towards, the erotic thriller boom, so like Basic Instinct. And a lot of those movies, oddly enough, do have like slasher elements. If you watch
Basic Instinct is a slasher.
Yeah.
Basic Instinct is, look, there's an erotic element. Superheroes are a thing. We got to remember Batman was massive. And Batman did something that only Freddy was doing at the time. Batman sold toys. Star Wars was done. George Lucas said bye-bye almost 10 years beforehand. So, Kenner was so desperate for another Star Wars movie, like, hey, we wrote you a treatment. Can we get some toys out of this bitch? people were always looking for merchandising opportunities. And so you get all the Corman. I think Corman did like Black Scorpion and shit like that. Those
Yes, he
straight
did.
to sci-fi.
For Showtime. Yeah,
Showtime,
yeah.
sorry. They made way too many Batman films in that moment. Not until you get The Crow, Blade, and The Matrix do those movies actually get really good.
Mm-hmm.
They figure it out especially with Blade. They really figure out the formula. Maybe The Crow. I take that back because The Crow comes out first. I guess The Crow, they figure out the formula for this kind of comic book.
I mean, I think Seven, like I think we'd think of Seven as a horror movie if it was, and Silence of the Lambs too. I think same principle, right?
Fuck
like
yeah.
I think we would think about it that way if the people that we were following around for most of the movie were actually like the victims or almost victims of it, rather than the people trying to figure it out, right? Like that. I mean, it's funny because I mean, obviously, we're talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. When I said something somewhere on the '90s stream, and you pointed out then, right? There are a few scenes in Nightmare on Elm Street that are, you know, the cops puzzling over what's going on, right? But that's not, you know, that's not like most of the movie, right? That's like a small, you know, that's like a small piece of it, and it's, you know, and it's really there to like tie into the sort of larger thing about the adults being clueless and, you know, not being able to protect anybody.
I look at that era, and I also look at the actors that are in those movies and the awards they won from those movies. They never would have won those awards if they were horror movies.
Yeah.
And I think we have to remember that even when we look at horror movies to this day, what's the first thing we do if we see a big name actor in a horror movie? We go, holy shit, I didn't know so-and-so was in this movie. Because we look at horror movies as less than. Even us as fans, they're not going to be looked at in the same regard as these thrillers, because so much schlock got produced. Because once people found out, hey, you want to turn a really quick profit in Hollywood, make a horror movie. You don't need a lot of money to do it. And even decades before John Carpenter, there was drive-in horror movies that made money that were crap. People like to be entertained and mildly frightened and to laugh at silly people dying. It sounds dark. It's the truth, right? They are a release, a cathartic release. And every so often, someone gets a little bit of a budget and they do some magic with these movies. I still think Tobe Hooper is such an underrated director.
Amen.
Because he never gets his credit for Poltergeist. Everybody always thinks it's Spielberg because it's got the Spielberg shine. And number two, Life Force, pretty entertaining film. Even if that woman had clothes on, it's an entertaining film.
Have you ever seen his prequel to Nightmare on Elm Street?
Who? Hooper's?
Tobe Hooper did the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares, and it's literally it's an origin story.
Where Freddy goes to trial?
Yes, that's the origin story. Tobe Hooper directed it. Yeah.
And that is available on Amazon Prime.
Yep.
Thank you, Stephen Guy says Life Force rules. Tobe Hooper also made The Funhouse.
The Funhouse. You know, my favorite of his from the 80s is probably Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
I love
it. That movie is basically saying screw yuppies. The whole movie is just them killing yuppies. Then the other thing is, yeah, the family got rich by, you know, cannibalizing people and then selling them as chili.
I mean, the first part of it is that. I mean, it's like my whole thing about that movie is that I was so excited about it. Like, I've only seen it once, but it's like I was so excited about the first part of it, and then it was like, wait, what? Right? Because it's like the opening kill is so good, and the highway. That's like, oh shit, right? These people are going to be in the city. They're going to be like, they do all this setup that like everybody's there for the game, and they're there. You know, they like, you know, that like it's this whole setup for this. That like this family is going to be going around like massacring people in this, and then it what it feels like is like, oh, did they just run out of money partway through this?
I can tell you what happened.
Yeah,
it wasn't that they ran out of money. There's actually footage of all the cut scenes from Texas Chain. There's a whole yuppie massacre scene where they just kill a bunch of yuppies. Then they go to the movie theater and they kill people at the movie theater. And Joe Bob Briggs shows up. And I guess they just thought it was too much and it would pad out the running time too much. But there's literally a scene where they take a night out on town and kill all the yuppies.
Yeah, because like all that
There's
stuff
like 4 scenes
that they seem to be setting up at the beginning of the movie, you know, with the chili cook-off and the game, the radio station, everything. It's like, oh, this looks like such an awesome movie. And then to me, it felt like, oh, we're just going to go back to the house and do the first movie again. But like,
I mean, assume there were edits. That's how I look at stuff like that.
Yeah, what's really sad is like it's probably 10 to 20 minutes of footage that got cut out where between what's her name? Stretch going to the lair and, you know, the family finding her. There's a whole like 10 to 20 minutes where they would have gone out on town and the footage exists, but Canon Film Group did not take good care of it. So the only footage we have, and you can find cuts of it online that insert the footage in, but it looks really grainy and bad and it's work print style stuff. But that's why the movie feels very odd in a way.
Yeah. Oh no, that makes sense. I mean, like again, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, perfect movie. The second one, like the setup excited me so much that like then like the delivery and the second act I was, you know, I didn't love, but okay. So
you still haven't seen Life Force though, right?
I have not seen Life Force.
I think
Matilda May. Oh my god.
Are you alone?
It's a funny question to ask in a horror movie stream. Yes, I am alone.
Is the call coming from inside the house? You should watch Life Force. It is.
I might. Yeah.
Just watch it. Just take me and JG's word for it. You will enjoy. It's a great take on the vampire story. Steve Railsback, Luke Picard / Professor X with hair. Who else is in that movie? I don't know, but that's enough right there.
Okay, well, I've not seen that yet. You know what I have seen though is Freddy versus Jason.
Freddy versus Jason, because we're coming up.
Real quick, can I comment on one more thing with Wes Craven's New Nightmare?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say and I'm not trying to get in a cheap plug because I like these people, but there's a YouTube channel called The Horror Show, run by Cecil Laird, and he just did a fan sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now you hear fan sequel, you're probably like, oh, is this some backyard movie thing? No, it's not. It was a professionally made movie, just came out last month. Miko Hughes, who plays Dylan in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the little kid, he's in this sequel called Dylan's New Nightmare. And it's actually a really good fan sequel 30 years later. And they're probably going to do more of them now. And they're trying to get Heather involved and potentially even Robert Englund to do a feature-length version. So if you go on YouTube and just look up Dylan's New Nightmare, if you're a fan of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, you have to see Dylan's New Nightmare. I mean, I like it so much that in my head, it's canon.
Damn. Some of these fan fiction films, that's the power of the internet right there.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the internet.
Well, they're much more professionally made now.
Yes.
People, so.
These Friday the 13th fan movies too are way more professionally. I didn't know it was a fan film. I watched one of them the other day.
Never Hike Alone?
Yes.
Was that the one?
Yeah, I had no idea.
They just released a sequel to that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just had to mention Dylan's New Nightmare. If you like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, definitely watch that.
Nice.
So Ben, you start your essay off by talking about watching Freddy vs. Jason.
Yeah, because I was so this is actually, other than the best forgotten 2010 remake,
we will not talk about that tonight.
That's fine. It's just as I think it's just as well to just to just erase that from our collective memory. But other than that, Freddy versus Jason is the only one of these movies I actually saw in the theater. I watched it with my little brother at Celebration Cinema in Lansing, Michigan. And I start out the essay by recounting being pulled over for speeding on my way home from watching that movie. And the cop asked, the sort of series of probing questions they'll do sometimes to try to get you talking for a little while so they can tell if you're drunk or whatever. He was like, "Oh, where are you coming from?" I was like, "Oh, from the movie theater." He was like, "Oh, what did you watch?" And I said Freddy versus Jason, and it's like his eyes lit up and he forgot about the ticket he was about to give me. And we just spent the next 10 minutes talking about Freddy and Jason. I think that sort of small, silly interaction kind of says something. I mean, I guess some of what JG was talking about earlier kind of speaks to this about how much anticipation there had been for this movie, right? People had been waiting for this crossover for a very, very long time,
Well, that's how Jason Goes to Hell ends, when you have Freddy's hand
Yeah,
pop up and
well,
grab the hockey mask down.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's back in 93. This is coming out 9 years later.
Yeah, or 10 years.
With
2003.
a super dope soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, and it is funny because it's like if you go back and watch that, that really is just a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that Jason is in, right? It's not really a Friday the 13th movie, and I think there might be a couple reasons for that. I mean, part of it is just kind of a consequence of the. I mean, part of it I think actually is an artistic reason. I mean, it's just kind of the consequence of the personalities, right? That so much of the, so much of what classically makes Jason scary is really the sort of vacantness, right? That he's just this force of nature going around killing people, silently, right? Whereas Freddy's overflowing with personality, so that kind of makes sense on that, on that level, and part of it, I'm sure, I think is what JG was maybe just about to get into. It looked like he was about to say something about this part of it. There's sort of, I'm sure they're kind of mundane, like behind the scenes reasons having to do with how the movie was made, but like also, I think it just kind of, I don't know. I think it speaks to the sort of power of that basic Nightmare on Elm Street imagery, that it ends up feeling so much that way. I mean, this is one of the things that, Jason, when you were, you were off cleaning up blood, we were talking about a little bit, was the way that in some of the Nightmare movies, they feel the need to put all this effort into explaining how he comes back. And some of them, they're just like, fuck it, don't worry about it, he's back.
Yeah.
And this is sort of somewhere in between, because the whole excuse for Jason is this, that, what does he say at the beginning? I've scoured the depths, Freddy says, I scoured the depths of hell and I found you, and, you can't die. So I can, you were just sleeping, so I can bring you back. And then if you kill people on Elm Street, they'll think it was me. And, then they're kind of hearkening back to the Freddy rules from the very first movie, that it's the fear that gives him his power. So if people are afraid of him, then that's why, then that's like where he gets his power to actually kill people in his dreams. And then they start fighting because they have to start fighting, or else the title of the movie doesn't make sense, right? But like, overall, it does feel like it's kind of 95% a Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
It's definitely a nightmare film, first and foremost. I don't know. It's a weird movie for me to watch for a few reasons. First off, I kind of get taken out of it in a weird way, because I know all the actors that are in it, because I've seen so many low budget Canadian movies. And no, I'm watching the movie and I'm like, oh, I noticed that. Oh, that's in that part of Vancouver. I haven't even been to Vancouver. That's how many movies from Canada I've seen. And the cast is really good. Not just Robert Englund, but Gary Laughlin, who plays one of the cops in it. Brendan Fletcher, who I think is an underrated actor. He's one of the kids that's in the hospital taking the Hypnosil, the blonde kid. And of course, Catherine Isabel from Ginger Snaps, who I absolutely adore.
Ginger
and have
Snaps.
had a massive crush
First
on.
of all, can we say Ginger Snaps the most underrated Canadian horror movie of all time.
It's my favorite werewolf movie.
Ben, have you seen any of the Ginger Snaps movies?
I haven't. I remember I
Oof.
started to watch number one once, and I don't remember what happened that night that I never finished the movie. But yeah, I have not.
Ginger Snaps is worth 1 and 2. I never saw the third, but Ginger Snaps 1 and 2 definitely worth a watch. I love those two Canadian horror movies. When we talk about horror movies of the 90s, those two do that whole WB teen star thing very, very.
They do it right.
Yeah. I think mainly because we didn't recognize those people from our American television. That helped. Like that for movies that are trying to do something new, like let's admit, if you're trying to do something new, don't use big time actors. Why does Rogue One work so well? Yeah, the script is great, but you don't really know outside of Forrest Whitaker. There's not a lot of big time actors in that movie that are carrying that film.
Yeah,
Unless you don't like Rogue One, and you're like, I don't give a shit.
no. I actually do like Rogue One, and and I definitely hate the rest of the prequels in a way that you don't. But I do like Rogue One because it's it's the only one that actually makes the series make more sense instead of less sense, and it also. And it's honestly like, I mean, as much as it does suffer a little bit at the end, I think from being a prequel, that like some of the energy to me is drained from it at the end because it's like literally leading up to showing us a scene that we've already seen. But up until then, I liked it a lot. It was like it's a good, like, despite being a free prequel, it actually felt like you were watching something new in a way that it doesn't when you're watching any of the other prequels, or sequels for that matter. And they have and also it's the only one that has, like, honestly, the way like the rebellion is handled in Rogue One is actually like objectively smarter than the original the original trilogy, right? Because it's like in the original trilogy, because George Lucas, God bless him, can only conceive of things being completely good or completely evil. Mm-hmm. And like in the original trilogy, there's just like the rebellion. And in Rogue One, it's like, no, like every real revolution that's ever happened in human history, there are going to be different factions that don't like each other.
Mm-hmm. You have to admit, though, the ending of Rogue One makes Darth Vader ominous again.
Yeah.
Whether you want to admit that or not, like making Darth Vader evil again, much like New Nightmare was like, we have to make Freddy scary again. Changing the color of him, getting rid of the metal claws for the bony things. That's important because until that movie
familiarizes him, it's like, oh shit, what's that?
Why is he not doing the joke thing? He became a kid's thing. Kids dug him. Again, 10 years old, going to the theater to go see Nightmare 3. So this guy isn't scary anymore. Rogue One, that ending scene gave me goosebumps. And yes, I went and watched Star Wars right after it because Darth Vader was the man of nightmares like he was for me when I was a kid. So, no, I haven't finished watching Andor. I've only seen, and I canceled my Disney Plus subscription because I can't afford it.
Whoa. You guys are talking over my head. I've never been into Star Wars that much. I like it well enough.
Let's go back to Freddy versus Jason.
Yes.
I did want to say one more thing. I agree with you about the actors not being like well-knowns, but like I said, I think some of the acting in it is a little bit above what I usually expect from a Nightmare or a Jason movie, because all the actors in it, I'm familiar with the actors in it, and a lot of them are actors that had been working since they were like 7 years old. And I do think it just feels like a much more slick, professional movie than a lot of the other ones. And some people, that's, why they don't like it. But I think it works to the movie's benefit.
I agree wholeheartedly. It makes it watchable.
Yeah. And it's a fun movie. It's like, I mean, it's not, I mean, I think in both good ways and bad ways, right? I mean, it's like for better or worse, like it is a much simpler movie than like most of the other ones. I mean, it's just like, yeah, okay, there's this whole, you know, elaborate supernatural premise about, how both of these guys are in the movie and they're coming to conflict or whatever, but it's like
Right.
basically it's like just a very meat and potatoes slasher movie. But I
Right.
think it's like a very well executed one. I mean, it's like it's I mean, it's doing what it's doing in a very competent way. It's fun to watch. It was, it was fun to watch back then. It was fun to rewatch the couple times I've done in the last couple of years.
And you got to remember too. I mean, Ronnie Yu, the director, was just coming off of Bride of Chucky. He knew how to mix the sort of new metal sort of aesthetics of the time with, some comedy, some horror. The only thing that makes this movie hard to watch for me at times is some of the backstory. There's a bit of a Me Too-ish element
Mhm.
to the making of this movie. So Catherine Isabel, who I mentioned earlier from Ginger Snaps, she plays Gibby in this movie. I wish more people would talk about it because I've been told this has really affected her over the years in different ways, and it's an open secret. You can look this up, but you know, she is supposed to do a shower scene in this movie, and she's like, "I'm not showing anything. It's not in my contract." And Ronnie Yu, I think, pushed her very hard to do nudity, and I don't think she didn't do it in the end. They used a body double because it wasn't in her contract, so she won on that account. But I don't know, just that sort of the stories I've heard about Ronnie Yu trying to get her to do the nude scene and being very aggressive about it. When I see that particular scene in the movie, it kind of I get a little bit cringy when I see that. But other than that, I actually really like this entry.
The soundtrack on this movie has a bunch of new metal bands that you mentioned. It was a new metal soundtrack. Typo Negative is on that soundtrack. Is this before Peter Steele died? When did Peter Steele die? I thought he died. Oh, I guess this is before he died. Who else is on this soundtrack? Seven Dust. I like them. Sepultura with Mike Patton, JG. Hatebreed, In Flames. Kill Switch Engage. This is a metalcore ass metalcore. Wasn't this a double disc? Oh, he died in 2012. Okay. This was the best soundtrack of all of them right here, dude.
And it's also the only Freddy movie with weird Alice in Wonderland references. Remember the caterpillar? Caterpillar Freddy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Slipknot is on this soundtrack. Oh wow. From Autumn to Ashes is on this soundtrack. Jesus. This is a we need to, dude, I so wish this was in the champagne room so we could play some songs from the soundtrack. Roadrunner Records did the soundtrack to this. You remember Roadrunner Records?
I mean, it is. I feel like in a weird way, Freddy versus Jason might actually, despite some of what we said earlier, be more like of its specific time than like maybe any of these movies, right? Because it's like,
yeah,
all of the other ones, it's like even if like the subjects, the themes that they're covering maybe says something about the cultural moment that produced them, it's still there's still a sort of sense that you get from like all of these that it's like kind of could be set whenever. Whereas like I don't know, I feel like Freddy versus Jason, especially like the rave scene, like that feels so incredibly specific to the early 2000s.
Yeah. 2003 this came out. August 12th, 2003. Huh. Did you ever go to a rave, Ben, in 2000s?
I never went to a rave. I mean, I certainly went to see some like electronic music, like the sort of thing they might listen to at one. But yeah, I have. It's a very, again, like that just feels so specific in a way that like I really can't think of anything in. I really can't think of anything in the any of the other movies that feel quite that like specific. Like, oh, this is a scene that only kind of would have made sense during the 5-year period when this movie was made. And and in general, I don't know if this is just because the early 2000s is like, whatever. It's like a time I was in my early 20s, and it's like I was very aware of like stuff that was going on around me in a way that it's like, I don't know, when like Freddy's Dead came out, I guess I was 11, right? So it's like I don't know that I would have so maybe it's just that I don't recognize stuff, but like in a general way that's like a little bit harder to pin down. I just feel like everything about this movie, kind of every scene, every line of dialogue, like it's like that just it just all feels very, very 2003 to me in a way that like I don't know that what do we say 2000 and like number 5 comes out in like 1987. It's like I don't know that you could quite say the same thing about 1987 in that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna if I go to TJ before I come up to Los Angeles, I'm gonna get you the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack, Ben, so you can play it in your car.
Nice.
What out of curiosity is your favorite scene in this movie? I don't know if we can go around sharing that, but I have one scene that I love in this movie that above all the rest that I just find hilarious.
Kelly Rowland death.
Where, what's that?
Kelly Rowland death.
That's good. But for some reason, I always bust out laughing at the scene where Gib runs out and they're talking to the cops, and she just runs out, pushes everyone out of the way, and says, "What the fuck do you think?" She's just like yelling at this cop who is just a dunderhead. And every time I see that, I just bust out. I don't know what it is, but I find that interaction just hilarious. There's a lot of comedic elements in this movie that I think people
They found the sweet spot. They found the sweet spot for that film. Ben, what's your favorite moment in this movie?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like maybe it's actually like a creepy moment. Like I really like the thing where they're in the mental institution, and they're all the kids who like wouldn't stop dreaming, and so they like gave them so much hypnosil they went into comas, and they all like sit up to like point. It's like actually just kind of a nice little, whatever. It's like it's the kind of thing that there is in lots of movies, but it's like I think it's just like a nicely executed little creepy beat, so that definitely comes to mind. I think maybe, I don't know, the scene where they're in the van and our final girl has that like nightmare where she's like having the vision of like everybody deciding that that she needs to be that like she needs to be sacrificed to Freddy because she's a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like I don't know, it's like very goofy, and it, again, I don't know, I don't know that I can defend this exactly, but it's like again, somehow there's something that feels just like it's just soaked in early 2000s-ness.
So what do you guys think of the whole element of Jason being afraid of water? Because it's funny. Everyone always says to me, horror movie fans are always like, yeah, they should have got Kane Hodder to do Jason. And I'm like, well, there's a reason he was not cast in this. And it's probably because I know Kane, and Kane would have said, Jason wouldn't do that. He wouldn't be afraid of water. He's literally in water in Jason Takes Manhattan. And I know
the
a lot
first
of
time you see him, he's like jumping out of the water, like he's clearly hanging.
Right. But I know people that complain about that for continuity's sake, but I'm like, I don't know. I overlook that. I don't care.
I hate the Jasons. There are horror movie purists that really throw a middle finger to the Friday 13th franchise because it's so disjointed. There's zombie Jason. There's
body swapper Jason.
Yeah, there's did he grow up over to like Jason?
Very quickly.
He makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true.
And so it's harder to follow. Michael Myers gets muddled. Anybody that says, "Oh, I love Halloween 4, 5, and 6," I'm like, "Do you?"
Yes, I do actually. I love the Thorn trilogy.
Look, only
we'll argue about it one day.
Only you're allowed to say that because I believe you. But people that like that aren't you They're like Clippers fans to me. It's like, you don't exist. You don't exist. You're not real. You
Yeah.
are the Tooth Fairy.
I mean, I think the fact that there is so little, that the continuity is so all over the place to start with kind of makes it hard to get mad at Freddy versus Jason for violating it. It's like, well, okay. I mean, that's like clearly it's all just kind of up for grabs here. So it's like it's yes, this is not a fact about Jason that exists in previous movies, but like whatever, it makes sense. Like I'm fine with it.
Someone says Freddy vs. Jason, low cut jeans, lip gloss, slow time effects. Had this movie came out 2 years later, it'd fall on the Platinum Dune, hostile torture porn spectrum. First of all, I still have a pair of low cut jeans, so I don't know why you're dissing them. They don't flare at the bottom, but that's not the point. JG, do you have any low cut jeans?
No.
Ben, are you low?
I have like 4 or 5 pairs of jeans. They all look exactly the same. It's
dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought them on accident. They were like really inexpensive, and I was like, "Oh wow, these are really cheap," and it's the size, and I don't try anything on. And I was like, "Why do they do this?"
You know what? I wanted to comment on something one of the comments said. What JG doesn't like has to be a very short list. That's probably true to a large extent. I'm very easily entertained. Can you believe, by the way, that some of the original people that were offered this movie, by the way, over the course of 10 years, because this was in development.
I've met people that wrote scripts for this fucking movie at a horror convention.
Yeah, there's insane scripts. At one point, there was a script where they were going to have 2 guys that thought they were Freddy and thought they were Jason fighting each other. They weren't even the real Freddy and Jason. Peter Jackson got offered this movie. Guillermo del Toro got offered it.
Dude, the amount of people that have written scripts for this fucking movie. This movie's for 9 years. It sat in just purgatory until finally the time was right. And we have to admit, that time was right. They could do a sequel right now, I think, because there's so many different kinds of comedic horror movies, really dark comedies that you can do a Freddy vs. Jason 2 if you want to. I don't
maybe they'll finally do one of those Joe Blow videos was talking about how after the success of Freddy vs. Jason, there was all this interest in a Michael Myers versus Pinhead movie. And there were actually treatments that were worked up for this and stuff. And, obviously they ended up deciding against it, but there were a few different ideas for how that would go that were going around.
The downside to Freddy vs. Jason, and if they do make another one or they do some kind of Marvel Universe Freddy vs. Jason, is if that movie was to mildly hit. And again, like we said, they don't have to hit like Marvel movies. They just have to turn enough profits and they'll do it again. We would be so tired of horror movie crossovers.
Yeah, I mean, well, you had Freddy vs. Jason 2003 and Alien vs. Predator in 2004. So, I always wanted, it's like, what I really want to see is Freddy versus Alien. I want to see what the alien dreams are.
That either you're gonna have Freddy be like a Wolverine type character in this weird universe, or you're gonna have the Dirty Dozen kind of Washington got the scariest monsters together to stop Lex Luthor and some other made up bad guy because they're gonna steal a gun that turns the sun purple and everybody dies. Yeah, that's my fear of that thing happening, that they would try to, because that's what everybody wants to do. Let's put all the bad guys together and act like good guys, and we could just sell shit tons of merchandise. I mean, who wouldn't want the Freddy, Jason, Leatherface, Michael Myers team of killers to stop some sort of evil plot? We're right in the middle of U.S. eating some good propaganda, so it'd probably be like a terrorist plot from some brown people. No one there's these brown people, but
there's been talk over the years of trying to do a horror movie version of The Expendables with all these horror luminaries. They tried to do it with a really horrible movie called Death House a few years back, and it was just awful. And I'm like, I don't know that we're probably going to get to that point where you're going to have Michael, Freddy, Chucky, Leprechaun, and everyone else team up with each other to get to defeat evil.
Leprechaun. They did. Marvel had something like that. There is a team of supernatural. There's a werewolf. There's Morbius, I think, and there's somebody else. I forget. And they have a supernatural team, but I could see these guys. Look, as we're saying this, if this happens, guys, just know these motherfuckers owe us some money. And if you do it New Line Cinema,
We coming for you.
I know, but I'm not gonna lie. I would go see that movie, and it would be the worst propaganda BS in the history of propaganda BS. I'm telling you, it would be a terrorist plot. They're trying to thwart. And the terrorists aren't afraid of anything, and they're like, the only thing that can stop them is if we get someone to attack them in the dreams. And then Freddy goes, I can do this, but I need a team. And then he's like, and then Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Leatherface. There you go.
Yeah. Now that'd be like a new, on Twitter when you're like, people are harassing some like, leftist writer, be like, why haven't you condemned Hamas, even though they actually have like 20 times? That's like, it's like, even Freddy Krueger was willing to put aside his differences with the U.S. government to attack these people.
Like, it's like this. There's someone like this, and they're about to make it, and it's going to be horrible and great, and we're going to watch it and then write think pieces about how much U.S. propaganda it is.
I keep imagining that's the dream of Jason Blum from Blumhouse. It's like, no, for years, I swear to God, when Blumhouse got The Exorcist and they got Halloween, I was thinking they're going to try to get the Jason movies next, because that was in legal limbo for the longest time. And then they're definitely gunning for Freddy, and they're going to try to make an entire slasher movie universe, and it's going to be the worst thing ever. Please do not do this, Jason Blum. My God.
Right now, Jason Blum is listening to those guys from TiR got a great idea here.
Oh God.
Why do I sound so much older than I really am?
Yeah. So Zach in the comments, I also love Cabin in the Woods, for the record. Very into that movie.
Pretty soon machine learning will make this possible. I can't wait. So the other day, I think it was the show you were on, Ben. We were joking about don't say Ibrahim X Kendi's name 3 times. Were you on that show?
Candyman.
Somebody made a Kendi. They put Kendi's face. I don't know who did it. If you're watching the show right now, please send that to me on whatever. I think I saw it on Instagram. Somebody did a Kendi Man thing. Please send it to TiR or Jason Myles Instagram. That was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I want to pass it to everybody, and we will give you props.
I gotta ask you before we wrap, because I know you're probably trying to wrap this up, Jason. We've been on for 3 hours now, but so someone said I have a very short list of movies that I'm not big fans of. I have to admit, Cabin in the Woods, although I like it, it is one of those that sort of rubs me the wrong way, because I just feel like Joss Whedon's attitude in that movie is, there's nothing new under the sun with horror. It's kind of just a dumb, stupid, dead genre.
Interesting.
I really did not feel like it was a love letter. And I don't understand. Well, I get why people like it, and I like it to a certain extent, but there's also a part of me that is very annoyed by that movie.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I never got that vibe from it.
Yeah, maybe it's just my reading, but
I can
I think
where you get that. I can totally see where you get that from that movie.
And I mean, it's cool that he riffs on the tropes and whatnot, but I think there's too many people in the horror movie world that think there's nothing new under the sun, and there's a lot of new stuff out there. It's just no one's willing to look for that.
No,
kind of thing. Everyone wants to.
Merman's new. Haven't seen that in the movie.
Well, that's true.
Merman.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Because remember, they do the whole thing where like Josh from the West Wing, you know, it's like keeps wanting the people to pick the merman, and they never do, and then like the merman kills him at the end.
Merman.
that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. Actually,
Look, I'm still catching up on movies I just never saw. There's so many movies I never saw. Every time I watch one of these amazing, I'll do a plug for these people again, In Search of Darkness documentaries. When they finally got finished with their 1990 to 94 one, I'm sure I'm going to find so many movies in that. I had house guests here because there's another documentary that I'm working on about displaced Ukrainians and the punk scene in Tbilisi, in Georgia, Tbilisi. And I put on the science fiction In Search of Tomorrow, which finally hit Amazon, where they stream them, or you could buy them. And did you finally watch that, Ben, or did you even start that?
I don't think I have. I will also say that in general, my relationship to the In Search of Darkness movies is like, I always enjoy what I watch, but like, because they're all like
5 hours long.
8 hours long, you know, it's like I never even really go into it with the goal of seeing the whole thing. I just kind of like, you know, it's like, I'll watch some of this for a while.
They're great. To me, they're the greatest go to sleep movies. JG, if you have Amazon or Shudder, you have Shudder. Definitely watch In Search of Darkness if you haven't already. I feel like you probably watched it already and own probably half of the catalog of the movies.
No, I know In Search of Darkness. I think stuff like In Search of Darkness is really good because, like I said, I think the biggest issue I have when people talk about horror movies now is, and part of it's just because, you know, the YouTube horror movie community and whatnot and social media horror movie community, they go for what gets clicks. Yeah. And what is going to get the most clicks, unfortunately, is something like Exorcist, The Believer, you know, and please, David Gordon Green, stop. But there's so much stuff that comes out that people just completely overlook. A lot of it's on a lower budgeted end, but there's a lot of creative and interesting films that come out that I've come across in the past like month. And I think it's a real sad thing where people just want to revisit. I mean, I love the Freddy movies, but it's not the only thing out there, I guess. And I think some fans are too nostalgic.
Dude, there's so much stuff I haven't seen in the 80s. You sent me another movie the other day.
And I'm pretty, I'll fess up to that. I mean, like, maybe that even connects to why I like Cabin in the Woods so much. But yeah, I am pretty driven by nostalgia with this stuff.
That's
what was the one you were talking about that I sent you? Was that
the home invasion movie?
It wasn't. It's not a. I don't know if it's a home invasion. WNFU Halloween special.
No, not that one. You sent me a home invasion movie before that. Or you were talking about it. You didn't send it to me. You were talking about it, and I asked you where I could find it, and it was on Tubi. What movie was that?
Okay, I'm blanking on which one that was. I've seen so many in the past.
It was an 80s. I had never heard of it. It was.
Oh, Curfew. Yeah, Curfew with what's his name? Not one of the Brady Bunch kids.
Peter Brady.
And Kylie Richards from the original Halloween and Watcher in the Woods is the main character.
I had never heard of that movie before. That's what I'm saying. There's so much stuff. Like people get.
Yeah, there's so much older stuff and newer stuff. There's a whole
world that I haven't seen that's literally at my fingertips now, or at all of our fingertips right now. So I hear people say, like, what new bands are you listening to? It's like, dude, I don't know. There's so many old ones that I can finally hear all of the music now. I never owned Led Zeppelin 2 back in the day. You know what I mean? I never gave a shit about certain Steely Dan records that are now at my disposal. But someone asked how we like Tucker and Dale. People get mad at me for talking about Tucker and Dale too much. I think Tucker and Dale was genius, and I think
I love Tucker.
It was the beginning of this silly horror comedy stuff that I fucking love. I love all the horror comedy stuff. But In Search of Tomorrow, if you guys haven't seen it, if you guys are science fiction fans,
yeah, I watched a little bit of that a few nights ago. In the same way that I watched In Search of Darkness movies. Like I watched like half an hour of it or something, but like I really enjoyed what I watched. Yeah.
You're never going to watch it all. But when my house guests were here, literally he's sitting down with a piece of paper, writing down movies. He's like, dude, I've never seen this. Oh my God, I've never seen this. This looks so good. I've never seen this. This looks so good. There's just so many movies. In Search of Darkness 1 through 3, and someone said sadly 1 is not available for streaming anymore. They go over like almost every horror movie from the 80s, even all the direct-to-video releases like Video Dead and stuff like that. It's not just cult classics. It's not just movies that you see a lot of these people that talk about rarely seen horror movies talk about. There's just movies most we had never talked about. So check that series out. It's really, really good. Definitely, if you like Nightmare on Elm Street, if you haven't seen Never Sleep Again, it's about 4.5 hours, but they go through every single movie in the series. Do they go through Freddy vs. Jason in that?
I believe they do. I know they even go through Freddy's Nightmares on that.
Yes, they do. They go through everything. Because I think it comes out in 2009. So yeah, they definitely do that. There's also if you guys are Friday the 13th fans, there's a Camp Crystal Lake or Crystal Lake
Memories, and then his name was Jason was the other one.
Crystal Lake Memories is about 3.5 hours, 4 hours long as well.
Right.
It goes through all of the movies with all the actors. If you guys want to see these movies, hear about scripts that never made it and stuff like that. And then also there's a great YouTube channel called Joe Blow Horror. Is Joe Bob Briggs behind that channel at all, JG?
No. Joe Blow is its own thing.
Who are those guys?
I don't know all the people involved. I think John Squares is one of the editors at Joe Blow, or maybe he's Bloody Disgusting. I get them mixed up.
Yeah, he's Bloody Disgusting. Joe Blow Horror is probably one of the best channels about just movies in general. If you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, the people that take shorter dives into these things and don't have these 3-hour long streams. But thank you guys for hanging out with us.
I was going to recommend something since you're plugging some horror stuff. Next week I should be having on my show the people who made this really campy sort of trauma-esque movie called Murder Size, which is exactly what you think it is. It's like an 80s homage to both
Death Spa,
campy horror. Yeah, and aerobics. But that's a really fun one. And there's this guy by the name of Jay Burleson who just made 2 movies back to back. The third Saturday in October, part 5, and then the third Saturday in October. You have to watch the 5th one and then the other one. That's the order they came out in. But if you like these low-budget 80s slasher movies, he basically does the perfect send-up of them. And they're both on Tubi. Third Saturday in October is a lot of fun if you like 80s slasher movies.
Tubi is free, and it has all the Charles Bronson movies he did for Canon.
And that movie Murder Size is also on Tubi, I should say. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
So Ben, if you don't have Tubi on your American television, you should be definitely watching Tubi because you can watch all of the Charles Bronson Canon movies. You have to watch,
including 10 to Midnight.
10 to Midnight and Kinjite Forbidden Subjects. Kinjite. It's there. Tubi's good. Shudder's good. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, talking horror. Tomorrow I'll be back here at 9 a.m. my time. I will be doing some writing once I'm done with this for the script for tomorrow. We'll be talking about women in hip hop. Is contemporary hip hop over sexualizing women? I do not look forward to that show. Just because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Ben's like, I don't believe you.
Well, I've just heard too many of the things you do say to believe that.
I'm very excited. Toussaint put this show together for tomorrow, and we have a hip hop journalist coming on to have this conversation with us, and who was also female, so it won't be a boys' club. So get ready for lots of this. There you go. There you go. So thank you guys and have a good night. I'm reading you guys' comments. We are empty.
Russia was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers. They have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government.